Chen Guan asked the doctor whether he was really sick and whether his illness could be cured. The guy's question found the doctor by surprise. She hastened to convince the patient that he had no illness. The girl repeated that for a student at his age it was not worth worrying due to a simple physiological phenomenon. The young man wanted to quickly leave the office of a young doctor, suggesting that in this case he did not need medicines. The doctor explained that, although the student did not need to take medicines, but she had to monitor his feature. After asking why he had to follow, the guy found how a pretty girl came closer to him. Having taken off the mask, the doctor said that Guan had a few days like it, which exceeded the norm. The doctor whispered in the ear that the physical development of the boys ended in the 22 years, and until then, the young man needed to follow himself well. Chen Guan hastened to assure the doctor that he would definitely take care of himself, if only to leave the office as soon as possible. The guy racked his head from which this happened to him, because recently he had not watched anything that could cause a disease. For several days in a row, Chen had heard a female voice in a dream that, without stopping, he told him in his ear. The problem was that because of this voice, the young man really does not sleep at night and tossed the side of the side, waking up in the morning all wet. The guy, looking under the blanket, came to the conclusion that if it continues to continue, then he could not walk normally. It all started 5 days ago, when one of the passengers forgot his mug in the back seat of the Guan car. The young man did not remember the face of the passenger, and some ancient Chinese girl was depicted on his metal circle. The depicted girl was so attractive that it aroused some feelings in the young man. The guy suggested that the ailment was sent to him by karma for theft of someone else's object. The situation was aggravated by the fact that Chenya had to pass an exam in English, because otherwise he did not receive a diploma. The thought of the young man interrupted the message from his friend, who was interested in where he disappeared. The poor fellow, because of his problems, completely forgot about the fact that he had agreed with Van to work out in the library. In order not to upset his girlfriend even more, the young man that urine rushed to the appointed place. Having met with a classmate, Wen looked at him with fascinated eyes. The guy was very surprised when he heard an unexpected offer from his friend. The student claimed that at that moment he could have a heart from such statements. Van reproached a friend that instead of a taxation, the guy would teach English at that time. Otherwise, if he fills up the 4th level, she would not see a diploma. The student became awkward, who replied that such statements were already in any gate. Having slapped her hands on the table, the girl repeated that she would do the promised, and give a friend such a motivation so that he would not have to work as a taxi driver until the end of his life. Pointing to himself, Wen announced that if Guan gives English, she could kiss the girl for 5 minutes. The student insisted that although they did not meet, she decided to do a favor for her friend. The young man noted to himself that after such a promise, spiritual peace does not even shine for him. Van herself looked quite mature for her age, and the proposal for 5 minutes was even more attractive to Chen. However, the guy was alert and asked his friend if she was trying to deceive him in this way. But the student insisted that she was very serious and did not scatter just like such promises. In addition, the girl found something in a laptop with her friend, which is why she took such a step. After that, Wen asked Guan to pay attention to the fact that from 10 tasks, he did not answer correctly to any. The guy expressed grateful to his girlfriend for help with English, albeit in such a strange way. The young man began to study the subject so persistently that the paper flashed with a bright flame. At the end of classes with a friend, the student got into his car and rushed home. However, upon arrival home, Guan continued to learn English in order to catch up. In the evening, the exhausted young man collapsed onto the bed in the sense of how much he was tired in a day. The guy wanted after he closes his eyes, already knowing the English language in the morning. As soon as Chen fell asleep, the girl came to him again that he demanded his blood, after which he could immediately learn everything he wants. The student woke up all in sweat, stating that no matter how he wanted to pass the exam, but not at the cost of his own life. Laying back on the pillow, the young man complained about how he was tired of nightmares with the participation of a stranger. The girl, who was placed in a mug, was indignant that the guy could not listen to her until the end of which was enough at least a drop of his blood. She repeated that in her magic glass there were 3,000 dimensions, and with the help of each of them, Chen could reach the heights in any skill. However, the captive of the mug was in vain bursting out. Since Guan did not hear a single word, snoring loudly, the girl was indignant that she, the queen, might die if the guy did not give her at least a drop of his blood. As soon as the sun was already ascended, continuing its training in the library, the young man believed that he was starting to go crazy, because yesterday he saw a vampire in a dream, which for the blood suggested teaching him English. Chen Guan also had the assumption that he lost his dream because of his girlfriend's promise. Wen, noticing the guy's gaze, asked him where he was, so stared so suddenly. Loiling with paint, the student immediately turned around, returning to the study of the subject. The student was interested in why the young man came to her aid that very day. Then the girl calmly returned from the computer club, unaware of anything. Suddenly, 2 hooligans were blocked for her, which was offered to have fun with them. At that moment, Van asked the guys to leave the road, or make them regret their choice. Suddenly, Chen appeared in front of the girl, who also asked the hooligans to let the girl go. The student asked strangers to disperse in a good way, and, in addition, smiled sweetly at them. The hooligans did not appreciate such a gesture of the guy, and starting to kick him with his feet demanded that he do not build a hero. This behavior of hooligans hung a girl so much that her eyes were filled with blood. And the next second, one of the guys received a face from Juan, who warned them earlier. After that, each of the guys received a strong slap in the face of an angry girl, grabbing Juan by the sleeve of his sweatshirt. Guan asked the girl not to fight with the hooligans, but to call the police. Without answering anything, the student only looked at her defender with her eyes, glowing rage. The girl's mind was blurred by anger because she did not recognize the young man and hit him in her stomach. Chen Guan experienced acute pain, not understanding why he received such an appeal to himself from the girl. Ven became extremely embarrassed when she realized that she was mistaken, taking the defender for the bully. Turning away from the study of English, the young man noticed a strange expression on his girlfriend's face. The student admitted that she remembered their first meeting when the guy without hesitation rushed to her help. The young man, in turn, asked the familiar not to remember this case, because if he knew how everything would turn around, he would not intervene. Returning to the study of the subject, Chen asked his girlfriend not to bother him to read. Having left the library with a friend, the student still had huge gaps on the subject, which is why Juan is unlikely to kiss. Suddenly, the girl called out a male voice that she asked her to take a hurry and wait for him. Jianghai, who was in a suit, said that if he knew that his friend would be in the library, he would take them a place on the roof. The old friend of the student advised her not to communicate with all sorts of guys who had small prosperity. Chen Guan, although he was really not particularly rich, found the statement of the guy outrageous. The girl, in response to the statements of he, only demonstratively stomped her foot on the asphalt, and after that, looking directly into the eyes of her boyfriend, she demanded that he go away. Guan noted that Jianghai stubbornly sought his girlfriend, that every day he flirted with her. The guy, although he complimented the student, was trying to achieve her location only because of the status and condition of her family. Not wanting to endure the company of an obsessive young man, Van clarified that she was not joking and again asked him to leave. The girl was interested in whether Jung was specially trying to enjoy her, to which the guy answered that he just liked her. The boyfriend decided to change the topic so that the whole university would not see how they could be seized. Worried about his reputation, local Loveless advised Chanya to be careful while in Wen's company that he could go sideways. Guan asked his opponent if he knew the swan from the frog. Being confident in himself, Zhenghe replied that the animals were distinguished from each other with the status. However, this was the wrong answer, since the swan, according to Chen, was different from the frog with bird flu. The girl liked it as much as her friend put in place of an arrogant boyfriend that she had already laughed. Being outside of his anger, the local handsome man repeated that Guan would answer him for everything. Stretching in his car in the parking lot, the young man kept repeating how much he was tired in a day. Suddenly, his gaze fell on a mug forgotten by the passengers, which did not give him rest. Looking at her, Guan decided that the nightmares began after he took this subject for himself. The guy caught himself thinking that for a cheap fake, the drawing on the circle was quite high quality. To confirm his words, the young man properly rubbed the image with his finger. Sweating, Chen left the parking lot, convincing himself that there was no witch in the circle. Having covered the part of the drawing on the mug with his finger, a female voice came to the student, demanding to remove his hands from Grandmother Gu. Looking around, Chen Guan tried to understand where the voice came from, because there was nobody in the room besides him. The student came to the conclusion that most likely the voice belonged to the ghost. Cracking his heart, the young man tried to reassure himself, convincing that there were no ghosts, and that he was simply overwork. It seemed to the guy that these were hallucinations caused by fatigue, and that it was necessary to sleep well, and then contact the doctor. But before Guan had time to get out of the parking lot, the guy familiar to him blocked his path. Having enlisted the support of strong guys, He told the student that he was waiting for him. It was obvious to Chen that after he disgraced Van's boyfriend, he decided to reduce his scores with him. Remembering his past fight with hooligans, the guy prepared as follows. He advised Zadir and his company to leave the road, which only angered Zheng more strongly. He replied that if Guyan asks him for forgiveness on his knees, he would think about sending an upstart to the hospital for only a month. Otherwise, if the young man does not agree, then he will make a disabled person out of his opponent. The student, who worked as a taxi driver, took out a huge hilt from his jacket pocket. With a sharp movement, the handle decomposed, turning into an oblong club. One of the gang of hooligans turned to his leader, paying his attention to the enemy's weapons. Jianghai said that there were 6 of them, that they could easily devote a frail guy with only a club. The young man ordered his people to attack, that they obediently and did, attacking Chen in a crowd. Clutching the weapon in his hands tightly, the taxi driver was preparing to deliver a response to the hooligans. In the next second, the student hit the tough end of the club on the head of the neighbor's nap. The guy cursed rudely, paving his palm to the place of impact, from which blood began to ooze. His colleague also received a club, but in his case, the blow of the weapon fell on the arm. The rest of the thugs wanted to attach to Guan, while he was busy with their comrades. Having immobilized the poor fellow, the hooligans began to shower him with strong blows of their fists. One of the attackers crashed so hard that the young man spat out a clot of blood out of himself. A member of the team, who got on the head, asked his comrades to step aside. Raising a metal stick above his head, the leader of the gang hired he was preparing for a response. The big man, lowering the weapon to his target, already anticipated as the crunch of bones will hear. However, watching the approaching threat, Chen was not confused in this situation. As a defense, the young man used a mug that was still in his hand. Having blocked the attack, the student crashed the bully again with a club, but not on the head, but on the body. When falling to the floor, the big man cried heart-rendingly that the guy broke his rib. The young man warned Zadir that if they continue to fight to death, then he would not be responsible for his actions. For a moment, the gang froze, digesting the words of Guan, who was not joking jokes. Dissatisfied, Jianghai decided to go, but finally warned his opponent that next time he would not get off so easily. With a crazy look, the student replied that if you hear another word from he would cripple him. Frightened by the threat that sounded, Ven's boyfriend rushed away with his gang. Watching the hooligans run away, the student was not surprised, dubbed them with cowardly chickens. But the guy, absorbed in his opponents, did not notice how a drop of his blood slipped from the chin. Guan did not realize that his piece flew right on the image of a girl on a mug. A drop of blood fell right on the girl's face, which finally waited for this moment. The GU, sharpened inside the circle, said that its hour had come and they would soon meet with Chen. The student vowed that if Jianghai would get to the bottom of him again, then he would not regret his strength to defeat this upstart. Looking at the mug, the young man noted that she turned out to be a good thing, that she was able to withstand the blow with a pipe and not crack. After a skirmish with the hooligans, Guan returned to the hostel, where he lived during his studies. At this time, Bai Fan was watching the game on the monitor. He offered to launch someone to himself while a round was clean. Junjin Qi repeated that he was not in place, and demanded to wait until his luminous dagger would increase. At this very time, Lin Xinwei was silently followed by what was happening on the screen. When the door of the room slammed shut, Jing Ke said that Guan returned, wondering why he was so lingered. But instead of an answer, the student threw himself the things that were saturated with his later. The young man, putting a trophy cup on the nightstand next to his bed, sighed heavily. Following in the bed, Chen replied that the rest of the evening worked from what was tired of like a dog. But by 12 o'clock, the light turned off the light, and the neighbors in the room also decided to go to bed when they heard Guan snoring. The first sunlight forced the captive of the metal mug to revive. Having made his way to the guy's sleep, the girl tried to reach him, leaving him to wake up. Madame Guabel did not stop everything, but the student asked plaintively to leave him alone. Then the captive of the mug grabbed the young man by the ear, because of which he finally woke up. Rubbing his eyes, Chen Guan decided that his neighbors in the room were again mocking him. There was no bounds to the guy's surprise when he discovered himself in a certain place, which resembled heaven. Behind the student was a female voice, saying that the Lord was behind him. Chen was surprised to hear a familiar voice, which he had already heard last night in the parking lot. In front of the guy was the very girl that the image flaunted on a metal mug. However, the Lord of 1,000 Dimensions threatened Guani that if he did not stop staring at her, then she will get his eyes. The student began to sort through all kinds of options that would explain what happened to him, but the thought of the guy suddenly interrupted the blood fountain that he was starting from his nose. The girl was indignant that she spent a lot of effort to transfer the guy to himself, who in turn behaved inappropriately. The student did not find what to answer, and he only continued to look at the Lord in love in love. The girl restrained her word, deciding to punish Guan, swinging his fist on him. Before the poor fellow had time to object, the next second I got a face from an attractive stranger. Returning to the topic of the conversation, the Lord explained that the mug found by Chen was actually a sacred glass, inside of which they were. Gu attacked a student who, for the first time in 100 years, dared to insult her, but the sacred glass recognized him as the savior of this world. The Lord said that the young man had to test 3,000 dimensions and help her return to her body. Madame Guise told the chosen one that he had 100 attempts, and that if he succeeds in holding out for 6 months, he would return back to his world. The guy woke up with horror, deciding that everything that he had to survive was just a dream. But unfortunately, everything that happened was true, and his throat turned out to be a sword blade. The next moment, not having time to do anything, Chen Guan was beheaded by a stranger. Soon the young man woke up again and everything was repeated when the sword was instructed on him. From this blow, the student managed to dodge an unimaginable miracle, retaining his life. Having bounced aside, the guy wondered if he really came to life after what had happened. Looking around, Guan still could not figure out where he was and what was happening around. The young man needed several deaths to realize that he became a participant in the test that the goddess spoke of. Despite the opportunity to revive after death, Chen did not want to die truly in this place. The student fought fiercely for his life, a movable sense of revenge, wanting to avenge the goddess when he got out of this world. Once again, waking up in the enemy world, the young man without looking grabbed the blade. Uniting with other pirates, Chen managed to survive against the enemy and break the endless series of deaths. Having got out of the ship, the young man began to serve the squad of the pirates with whom he defeated the opponents. Comrades of the young men discussed a huge hand that was the size of the sea, however. To find it, one life was not enough. The young pirate decided that the participants of his team were crazy, talking on such topics. But soon Chen realized that the hand, which pirates interpreted, belonged to him. And the invisible walls on the edge of the sea were the walls of the mugs. Before the student had time to rest, the enemy squads of the pirates again attacked the ship. True, unlike previous battles, this time, Guan met the enemy with a firm and confident blow of the leg. Having spent a single attempt to survive, the young man learned how to stand up for himself, crouched with the swords with another pirate. The student cursed this place and the goddess for sending him here. Thanks to the experience gained during multiple battles, Chen Guan became the new deputy captain of the ship. The team members were amazed as the young man managed to achieve such a position in just 6 months. Chen thought that he was made by the master 20 years of battles, because after every death, he began from the very beginning. For a young pirate, this was the last day in this place, and he could no longer wait for the moment when he could get even with the goddess. Returning to his world, Guan said goodbye to the pirates because he did not know whether he would see him again. Bowing over the sleeping neighbor around the room, Bai Fan carefully looked at him. Rising sharply to his feet, returning to his world, Chen knocked with a friend. The guy said that the young man slept under the table all night, but did not understand where he got so much strength. With undisguised distrust, the guy asked, "Did she really go only 1 night?" The student began to deny, saying that he simply got up from the wrong foot, and Bai Fan was about to have breakfast offered to take something for him. In order not to attract more attention to himself, the young man asked to take something to him, if only his friend left as soon as possible. Inspecting his body, Guan, to his surprise, found that his combat skills and strength were preserved. The young man decided not to focus on physical changes and deal with the goddess. The Lord of 1,000 Measurements asked whether Guanga was exciting, but the sea was the simplest measurements. Throwing a cup, Chen replied that the girl was a real kidnapper. She dragged him into a strange world without asking for consent. Madame Jiu apologized to the guy, but stated that climbing the side of the ship could no longer get off him. The student replied that he was no longer going to participate in the tests of the goddess, who were useless to him. The girl said that as soon as Guan spilled his blood onto the glass, she became his master. But if the guy decides to refuse to participate, then this will be equated with the failure, and in this case, the Lord will have to kill him. The goddess asked the owner of the cup, did he really get any benefit from the test? Thinking, the student agreed, but warned that for the next test he would need to gain strength. In the evening of the same day, Chen Guan, as usual before his journey in the sea measurement, went to dash. Suddenly, his father called on his mobile young men instead of the expected client. The man asked his son to go to the hospital to visit his mother, to which the guy asked if his dad was listing money for the medicine. But his father did not answer, and he was already called to the meeting, uttering in the end so that his son was studying well. The young man was annoyed because by several 100,000 yuan, they had to give 20,000 to medicines monthly. Although his father asked his son not to worry, He earned only 15,000 per month, but the student did not lose heart and wanted to deal with debts over time, having received a new order. Despite the whole day spent at the wheel, the guy was not tired, believing that 20 years spent in the sea affected this. After work, his girlfriend Juan was waiting for the young man, which helped him with English. Taking the guy's arm, the girl scared Chen to death with her actions. Feeling Juan's hand, her friend asked where he got biceps. The student joked that he simply trained every day, that he really did not want the girl to know about his metamorphoses. Inspecting a friend, Wen said that with the biceps he only became prettier. Suddenly, on the way, the couple appeared, Zheng He, presenting the head of the university group in Taekwondo. The young man asked his companion to hide while he would deal with the next He-Hek. The martial art master said that the club would not help the guy against the great Taekwondo. Unable to hesitate anymore, Zheng He demanded that Master Jin immediately beat his opponent. After these words, the head of the group swung his foot that was already near the face of Guan. Suddenly, for Gin, his opponent managed to block the master's crown reception. Chen, intercepting the student on Taekwondo, replied that now he would receive him properly, thanks to the acquired strength during the whole time that he was at sea. Guan easily threw his opponent. Juan, who watched the fight, could not believe that she really was her acquaintance in front of her. The student easily blocked the next lunge of Jin, with whom he could fight on an equal footing. The guy, in turn, demonstrated jumps on how to fight with the help of legs. The master of the university group in Taekwondo flew right into Zheng He, who also got it this time. Van's boyfriend wanted to object to the competitor, but he immediately fell silent, receiving a slap in the face. The young man said that he would arrange a fun life if he continues to bribe different guys so that they would deal with him instead of Jen. With tears in his eyes, a rich student asked for forgiveness, saying that not his girl would get out anymore. Throwing the upstart to the floor, Guan warned that if he saw him again, he would definitely finish the next meeting. After this incident, Ven asked his uncle to give Mr. Jin Yun to finally calm down. However, the man was bothered by the friend of his niece, Chen Guan, to which the girl objected, assuring him that he was not necessary to check. Looking at the evening sky, the student wondered how many more secrets was hid by Guan. The next day, the young man finished work ahead of time when the sun has not yet sat down. However, he did not have time to move away from his car. The stranger stopped him, whose hand lay on his shoulder. Looking at the man greeted, after which he proposed to move away and chat. Grabbing the stranger's hand, Chen asked him to mourn, since he was not in his taste. The stranger only stretched his mouth in a satisfied grin to go to the guy's refusal. After that, the man put his hand on the nearest pillar of the tree, from which the mysterious field arose. The next second, the tree broke into two parts, and the stranger repeated his request. From what he saw, all the courage of Guan, which he possessed a moment ago, immediately disappeared. The young man, bowing, decided to do the way a man ordered him, believing that he would not have enough strength to deal with him. The couple went deeper into the forest away from the city, which was somewhat worried about the student. However, the stranger did not realize that on the trees, past which they walked, surveillance cameras were installed. Chen, drawing the attention of a man to the sunset, suggested stopping and finally talk. The young man knew that the zone began further where there were no university surveillance cameras, and therefore it was dangerous to go. Still, deciding to stop, the man clenched his fist and turned to the guy in a derogatory manner. After the word said, the stranger turned to the student and waved his fist on him. The man moved so quickly that he did not give Guanya and the chance to dodge the blow, throwing him to the tree. Having hit the trunk with his back, the young man instantly fell to the ground, but was still conscious. Chen wondered who this stranger was, from the blow of which his whole hand was numb. Approaching the student, the man asked why he did not take advantage of his inner strength. The student began to claim that the man reread fiction, and that they lived in the 21st century, and not in medieval China. The stranger considered that the student did not pretend and really knew nothing about his inner strength. At this very moment, in the pocket of Uncle Van, the phone rang at the wrong time, interfering with checks. He decided that his niece somehow found out that he and Guan were here. In order not to catch the girl in the eye, the man threw the guy goodbye the phrase that he should have gone. Uncle Van left the young man in confusion, from whose head the thought of inner strength did not come out. The student shouted to the stranger to take him to students in order to teach him this technique. Hiding nearby, the man was indignant, believing that the young man was supposed to be grateful to him that he had left him alive, but was not going to teach him. However, for the master, she remained a mystery to how Chen managed to resist after his blow, after which his hand fell ill. That same evening, the student brought his friend that scattered in front of him in gratitude. The girl suggested Guanggu to go with her for filming if he was interested in seeing. With annoyance, the young man stated that he could not join, since his evening was scored for today with other matters. Suddenly, a loud story of the explosion came to the students, which also illuminated the evening sky. Without thinking twice, Guan followed from where an explosion came to find out what happened. Having reached his destination, the guy jumped out of the car and rushed to the pier. Resting on the railing, the student found a burning boat on the water, from which a column of smoke stretched into the sky. The flame with lightning-fast speed spread along the second floor, bringing down its remains down. In a hurry, people on board began to jump into the water so as not to burn alive. A detachment of rescuers hung in circles was already heading for the victims. The old man, who witnessed what happened, told that something caught fire in the back of the boat, which led to the explosion. The student suggested that the engine could explode, but none of the present could get to this place. The passerby that she watched the disaster drew attention to the fact that two actresses were suspended in the air. Indeed, if you look closely at the deck, you could find girls that were stuck on a wooden frame. One of the actresses tried to help her colleague but could not unfasten the belts. The director responsible for shooting by boat ordered your assistant to immediately lower the girls down. But unfortunately, the guy did not succeed, who stated that something was closed by the mechanism. At this time, the boat turned over to the side, dragging with her under the water the surviving passengers. One of the girls who were on land repeated that the actresses fell into the water with the boat. The student left his clothes to the old man and said that he did not have time to explain and had to save people. Having accelerated properly, the young man jumped from the pier in the water without wasting a second time. He saw a swimmer that rushed past them. The rescuer wondered who they had just seen. Rushing at all pairs, the guy counted seconds, hoping that the actresses to hold out to his arrival. By the 30th second, the student reached the boat and the girl, which inexorably walked to the bottom. Seeing a man in the water, drowning immediately pressed against Chen Guan, almost all the air out of him. The guy returned the girl to the surface of the water, deciding that rescuers would be engaged in her. Looking around, the student saw the actresses that they fell into a trap chained with belts to the frame. Diving back under the water, Guan spent to get to girls from land for only a minute. When he swam to the actresses, one of them lost consciousness, unable to resist anymore. The girl, who was still conscious, turned into consciousness when she felt fluctuations underwater. With all her might, she pushed her colleague away from herself that she fell into her hands to Chen. Meanwhile, as she herself began to go to the bottom, whose selfless act was not appreciated by the guy, while the young man was busy with the castle, 1.5 minutes have passed since the time that the girls were underwater. Fortunately, the guy still managed to cope with the castle and free one of the actresses from the belts. He swam to the second girl. Guan discovered that her supply of air was coming to an end. Despite the fact that almost 2 minutes passed, the student hoped that the victims to hold out to the last. Having reached the second girl, the young man deftly coped with the castle, free her from belts. However, by this moment, the actress lost consciousness just like her friend. Tightened with all his might, Guan tried to swim to the surface as soon as possible. Equally grabbing the air with his mouth, the student emerged from the water, holding the girls on his shoulders that they went to the bottom with the boat. Meanwhile, the director was worried about his career, because if the participant in the shooting suffocate underwater, then he would end. Chen so effectively emerged from the water that the man mistook him for the sea god. Still being in the air, the young man shouted so that everyone around dispersed. The next moment he, along with the actresses, landed on a boat of rescuers. The director, who was on her, asked how the poor fellow felt like, but Chen asked not to distract him, because the girls did not breathe. Remembering the lessons of first aid, the student began with the massage of the girl's heart, which lost consciousness first. Then the young man leaned over her in order to make artificial breathing. Having managed to bring the actress to his senses, the guy said that now it was necessary to help her colleague. Watching how Guan provided first aid, the director was a little envious of him, wanting to be in his place. After a few seconds, both girls came to life, swimming from seawater, which they had to swallow. Having completed life, it became embarrassed, because he only tried to save beautiful girls. After the adrenaline passed, and the clarity of the mind returned to Chen, the guy found that he was in his underpants. Despite the enthusiastic exclamations of onlookers that they watched the heroic feat of the young man, who wanted to leave the boat as soon as possible, the student did not want one of the present to notice his face, not to mention the photograph. The only thing that worried Guan at that moment was that he could be filmed in shorts. But even speed swimming did not save the guy from meeting with his newly made fans. In order to somehow hide his personality, the student lent his hat from the old man who was fishing nearby. A crowd of fans haunted a modest student for about an hour, chasing him along the shore. Meanwhile, the manager came to the actresses to report that the necessary medical equipment for examination was brought to the dining room. Chen Guan miraculously broke away from his fans, hoping that no one would find him in temporary shelter. The young man at the wrong time decided to squeeze his wet linen from the water, as the same director discovered him. Chen was shocked by the fact that the very girls he saved in his way. The student became so embarrassing that he literally turned into a stone statue. The actress, who arrived in time for the savior, handed him a towel. One of the girls involuntarily watched how Guan wrapped in causal places with a towel. Looking at the young man, the girl began to fantasize about how she would meet with him, running a few years ahead of joint relations. A friend of the Yage asked her if that guy was in front of them their savior. With a blush on her cheeks, an embarrassed girl confirmed the guesses of her colleague in the workshop. Seeing how her friend blushed, Jinyue touched her forehead to check if that temperature had that. Yage, not wanting to talk about her sudden love, said that she just had to be examined. After the inspection, her colleague decided to approach the guy and thank for her salvation. The lover was not against this proposal, which was completely filled with paint. As clothes, the savior of the actresses was offered to dress the film crew that was executed in the form of armor. The student protested, not wanting to put on such an expensive suit, asking in return clothes easier. The costumer said that they had only this knightly armor, especially since he was just right for a guy with his powerful body. The guy asked Guan to have lunch together, deciding to take advantage of the moment and make useful acquaintances. However, the young man abandoned the costume of the costume, as he wanted to return to his car as soon as possible if she was not yet evacuated. However, the studio worker did not want to just let go of a modest student. The guy handed Chen a large pack of money, the bills in which were 100 yuan marks. Guanu wanted to take money, but out of politeness, he began to declare that it was indecent about money for help. But the costumer insisted that the young man take the award that he honestly deserved. With a quick movement, the student took a pack of money, focusing on the fact that at the present time, no one had yet refused the money. Saying goodbye to the worker of the film studio, Guan hastened to leave, worried about his car. Before the student had time to leave the room, the director entered the room, facing him right in front of him. Chen knocked with a man's heads, because of which they both twisted inside. Grabbing the sore head, the director Xiaogan began to swear at the guy, accusing him of blindness. The student immediately apologized for not noticed a man, because he was in a hurry. Looking at Chen in a suit, the director stated that he was a departure by the admiral by inviting him to star in his film. The man tried to persuade the student, claiming that even without acting education, he would help him to break through in show business. Guan asked how much they paid for an amateur game, but immediately regretted his words. The director replied that it was necessary to hold out in the frame for 30 seconds, after which the guy could count on 100,000. The young man was incredibly lucky that at some point he decided that on this day, he could attract the money. The guy believed that the role assigned to him was a real trifle who had to portray a pirate for 20 years. The melon of Xiaogan repeated that he would hold back his word, and that the young man would come a few days later, when the shooting would begin. However, the director of the director was not shared by actresses who were outraged by his decision to release the young man. The girls were upset because they wanted to thank the guy for their salvation, wondering where they were now looking for him. Xiao Gogan replied that the stars of the cinema would not be worried because he took the guy to them, and after a couple of days they will meet again. Having rushed to his car, the student discovered some more with his things. This man turned out to be a patrol that, with a dumb question in his eyes, squinted at the young man. Starting to explain to the road service employee, many alarming thoughts were swarming in Guan's head. However, instead of a fine, the man began to praise the student for the heroism, so he did not want to remove points from him on a driver's license. The inspector called Chenya a real brave man, and everyone around began to shoot a student on his phones. Yaj with lust admired the hat, which the guy left that saved them the other day. Her friend asked why it was suddenly a girl looked at this hat so fascinated. The actress replied that this hat belonged to that guy, after which she breathed her aroma. Yua joyfully jumped into her friend, saying that she had finally fell in love with someone. The student's mobile phone torn from new notifications after his heroic act. Residents of the city began to read about the hero in shorts that, despite the difficult situation, retained courage and fortitude. Information about Guan spread at the speed of light, and everyone became aware that the guy worked as a taxi driver in ordinary life. In addition, photographs also flowed into the network, which captured the lifeguard of the cinema stars. Under the photograph there was an inscription that a real hero was not afraid of humiliation when people had lives at stake. Guan watched how classmates discussed his feat, without even knowing who the mysterious hero was actually in his underpants. Pushing away the student Chen away, he decided to change the topic, learning from the headman what kind of announcement she wanted to do. Baifan was outraged that his friend suddenly pushed him for no reason, but at the same second the guy dawned on when he carefully looked at his neighbor around the room. The young man stated that he had seen the cowards from Guan, that they looked like those who wore the hero, who saved the young actresses. Baifan suggested that the hero of the news was his acquaintance, but Chen stubbornly denied everything. Then the neighbor in the room began to ask the older whether she believed their common acquaintance. Then Pan Jiang entered the conversation that he ordered Bai not to attribute to Guanu's abilities that he did not have. Disracting the opinions, a dispute arose between the guys, which one of them wanted to find out with the help of fists. To defend Baifan was Song Jingke, who was already preparing for the upcoming fight. Guan advised his comrades not to get excited, because the classmates specially provoked so that the council would exclude them from studying. The young man began to tell his friend that he should have dealt with the bully in a quiet way, where there were no cameras and witnesses. Suddenly, Xiaoxun asked the guys not to quarrel, since it was the last year that they studied together. The girl clutching at the sleeve of Chani accidentally tore off him, exposing his muscles. The classmates froze in surprise when they saw the muscles on the body of their comrade. The student began to ask for forgiveness, saying that she would buy a classmate of a new shirt. Having calmed down, the headman announced the whole group that Professor Shen fell ill, and instead of a replacement, had been put another teacher. As soon as the guys learned that the teacher was a girl, they began to shower Shun with questions about the teacher's personal life. The student asked the group to support the teacher Zhou, hoping that they would all take an active part in the upcoming Olympics. But the students did not agree with the headman, saying that even Professor Shen did not believe in their basketball team. And while the students discussed the upcoming Olympics, the teacher was going to replace the corridor. The teacher Ju entered the office that she greeted the group's students cute. So far, they could not even imagine that such a luxurious girl would be their new teacher. Students all began to repeat as one that they were simply jokes. But the headman were ready to take all the awards at the Olympics. Sun Jinke announced that last year he became a run champion, so he would definitely bring victory to his group. The teacher thanked all the guys who expressed their readiness to participate in the competitions. Xiaoxun could not even imagine how the attitude to the Olympics of all her classmates changed dramatically. Guan turned to Bai, ridiculing the students that they fought for a place in order to sign up in the Olympics because of a pretty teacher. The young man restrained to this minute also asked to introduce his candidacy to the list of applicants. Chen, watching how the whole group went crazy because of Madame Zhou, decided to quietly leave the lesson. However, the headman did not allow him to leave, asking which section the guy wanted to sign up in. The student wanted to get a break from participating in the Olympics, but the teacher demanded that each of the group participate. A local upstart appeared immediately, who stated that their Guan was too tender for rough sports. As long as the classmate talked about the abilities of Chen, the guy standing near Xiao, a bullet headed for the backbone. Having rushed to Jiang, Guan grabbed the classmate by the finger in order to make it silent. He kicked him out. The young man repeated that he would soon be less than his acquaintance with one finger. Shun asked his friend to calm down, because if he breaks the classmate of a finger, he would also harm the new teacher. The guy took pity in a bully, but warned that if he dares to open his mouth on him again, then he would get in full. Having dealt with the conflict, the headman slipped a cheat sheet directly in the face of the guy to participate in the competition. The young man did not immediately consider the sport that his girlfriend offered to him. It turned out that the guy was to swim by a rabbit of 400 meters, but participation in swimming could give his personality the hero in his underpants. The girl received a form from her comrade, who signed up for swimming by a rabbit of 400, 800, and 1,500 meters. From watching the form, the older was torn off by Panjiang, to whom she was, to put it mildly, not happy. The guy said that at the Faculty of Architecture, there was a swimming champion that would also participate in a swimming competition. The student responded to the possible loss of Guan that the main thing was participation, not victory. After Xiaoxun left, the young man raised his mobile phone and scored someone. Comrades Chen were interested in whether he would really participate in the swim, who refused to go to the pool a month ago. The young man said that he simply did not have a desire to go to the pool with the guys, so he invented a fact about himself that he did not know how to swim. Lin Jingwei was offended, as he was sure that he was earned in order to communicate with him. Unlike Bai, this statement plunged a neighbor in the room in horror, who asked for an explanation. The couple clashed with each other. Each of them tried to try his opponent. Suddenly, a message from Wan came to Guanu's phone that she offered to work out today in the library. Grasping the phone from his friend's hands, Bai Fan suggested that he flirted with the old age of their group. He returned the phone back. The student asked his comrade not to climb into his business. The guy agreed to a meeting with his friend, while his classmates then encouraged him, then wished failures in love affairs. Ven was surprised when she heard from Guan that he wanted to play computer games, intending to cancel their deal. However, the guy did not want to stop studying English, wanting only to relax a little from study, turn off the brain, and restore strength. The girl said that she clearly read the desire to play games on her forehead, and all the restoration of forces was in no way connected. The young man asked the classmate to give him a rest, believing that the 20 years spent in the circle was enough to learn the tongue. A friend wanted to agree to take a break, but also wanted to play computer games. The classmates attended the computer club together, and Juan could not wait for the computer downloading, so she wanted to play. Turning into game characters, students were seriously tuned to victory. However, the place of victory, the young man every now and then lost to his rivals, having completely forgotten how to play. A member of the team, which was included in Chen, asked him to stop to deliberately lose. The student understood that he could no longer rectify the situation or turned off the sound of a sape man. Time passed, and at the same time, the number of defeats of Guan also grew, which seemed to play exactly the opposite. Other team members tried to convince the guy that they would still be able to win, but he himself no longer believed in victory in this game. Having met with a classmate, Juan began to mock him that he finished the round with monstrous indicators. The young man began to make excuses that he had not played for several months and lost his skills. Feeling his defeat, he asked to replay, but her friend demanded to play the match to the end. The student dragged with her to the computer club the very mug in which he prepared coffee. Getting to her, the guy drank, hoping that the drink would help him to cheer up. However, to his surprise, the young man discovered that he magically moved into the cup. Once again, finding himself in the possessions of the Lord of 1,000 Dimension, the guy began to be indignant that he had just begun to play. The mans that appeared said that if not for the student's friend, he would have lost a long time ago. Suddenly, Guan hit the goddess, demanding that she stop laughing at him. Flying away from the blow a few meters up, the girl was outraged as a simple mortal dared to touch her. But the student was not ashamed of his act, who had long been waiting for the case when he could get even with the goddess, who imprisoned him in a circle for 20 years. Not wanting to listen to the guy's insults anymore, Jiyu said that he would go down to him now and they would talk about everything. The Lord of the Measurements at a frantic speed headed down to the displeased young man. Chen managed to bounce at the last moment so that the girl did not crash right into him. As soon as the dust from the blow scattered, Guan discovered that the girl was lying on the ground, motionless. The guy seriously worried about the well-being of the goddess, starting to think about the poor development of events. I was concerned about the well-being of the leakage. The young man repeated that she could not give the ends so simply. Leaning the girl's fingers, the student, unfortunately, found that she stopped breathing. Chen caught himself thinking that if a girl dies, then he could never leave this place again. Suddenly, the girl disappeared, and outraged by the selfishness of the owner of the cup that decided to demonstrate all her divine power to him. To begin with, the girl with force hit Guan in the face, showing who was actually the main one here. After that, along with verbal insults, she began to water the guy with a series of powerful blows. Having finished beating the ungrateful student, the girl made him bend. The goddess wanted to strangle the ignorant youth, but if he died, then she would never get out of the glass. The Lord of the Measurements explained that the guy was very lucky, and before she would have killed him for that and everyone who would turn out to her arm, Guanu could not believe that the girl could cripple someone else that was disconnected from only one blow of the guy. Madame Jiu demanded to stop daring to her that she had spent all her strength to transfer herself to a glass. The student repeated that the girl did not complain, because she herself made him a savior, and had to respect him if she wanted him to go through all her trials. The Lord of the 3,000 measurement of her excuse said that she also had to be not easy inside the cup, but the girl decided to soften and explain to her savior how the glass worked. It turned out that if the sacred glass was ready to start testing, then his owner could get inside him at any time. Also, the world, which will fall. The test participants depended on which liquid was inside it. In total, there were 9 levels in the circle, and the guy was now at the lowest stage, on the first of them. Having looked at the goddess for a moment, the student again poured blood from his nose. The Lord of the Measurements did not immediately realize what suddenly happened to her savior. Quickly realizing what was happening, Madame Jiu punished the young man, because here he asked. Having received another thrashing from the goddess, the student flew off several tens of meters. To his surprise, Chen found that the girl's blow was powerful, but did not cause him severe damage. The captive of the cup explained that this time, the guy will have much less water due to the lack of mistress forces. The student decided that she took revenge on him, but was surprised when he ended up in his world in his usual environment. The next test should have ended when Guan won the game at the computer that he was in front of him. Approaching the monitor, Chen wanted to make sure that this time the goddess had prepared for him. The young man could not believe that he had to go through the games that he had recently played this time. We called me sure that he would quickly cope with the test, as he was well versed in computer games. By loading the game, the student intended to leave this place as soon as possible. Since the chair was extremely uncomfortable, Chen was mistaken, believing that he had spent 10 days to quickly cope with the game, although he was not at all tired. After another 10 days, the student was still gaining experience in the game, which was already full of throat, and only a month later, the continuous passage of the game, the young man managed to finish the test. The guy's torment ended, and he could finally leave one of the dimensions of the magic cup. But upon returning, Guan returned to the place where he was called up, back to a computer club. Van asked a friend for help, for which only 1 minute of real time passed. Looking at the classmate, Chen noticed tension and focus on her face. With annoyance, the girl said that they would most likely lose in this round. The words of the classmate sounded for the guy as a challenge, which he already wanted to check the newly combined skills. Having tied up the experience of Guan returned to the game with renewed vigor to help Guan win. The character for which Chen played easily dealt with all rivals. The headman also felt a second wind, thanks to which she destroyed 5 players at once. Turning on the sound in the headphones, the guy heard the joyful exclamations of the participants of his team. Having finished playing, the classmate was not able to find out how her friend managed to do this. The young man replied that he needed to go to the toilet for a minute, since from an overabundance computer graphs before the eyes of Chan began to feel sick. But the girl took such an answer to a friend as a personal insult, which she did not deserve. Ven believed that if she was tired of Guanya, there was no reason to react in this way. Returning from the restroom, the guy left the game, rubbed my eyes tired of the monitor. Grabbing the classmate by the cheeks, the headman wanted to know what had just happened to him. Watching the guy who turned white, his friend decided that it was bad there. And in order to get away from the conversation, Chen agreed that he was most likely getting sick. The girl was surprised that the classmate managed to get sick in such weather, to which he only replied that he most likely overheated. The classmate asked if Guan was sure that the reason for his well-being was ordinary overheating. The young man was uneasy due to the fact that his friend was so attentive trying to convince her that he felt bad from the game. The headman thought about the guy's words, which, although he was surprised by unexpected talents, was still quite weak. Ven said that if the game was brought to such a state of the guy, then they should return back to the university. Guan with horror noticed that he almost left his mug in a computer club. The student said that after he rests, he wants to work at night, since the next day was the weekend, and one could go to bed later. A friend did not take away such an idea, because Chen from the clan was tired and should not have drove in this state behind the wheel, and we scolded himself for the fact that he did not take the classmate to the house at first, after which you calmly went to dash. The student convinced himself that if he got behind the wheel, he would just air his head and be able to distract from the game. However, the guy could not escape from his annoying friend, who was insulting that Guan would not ask her money if he needed them so much. From now on, the student worked as a taxi driver not for the sake of money, but in order to relax and understand his mood. Having received a new order, the guy decided to call the client to clarify his location. The student wanted to go through geolocation, but the man on the other side of the tube asked not to interfere with sleep. Guan was surprised that he was mistaken in the number, although he called through the application, deciding to try again. Having recalled the number again, the young man again hit the sleeping person, so he decided to personally go and check the client. Arriving on geolocation, the taxi driver began to look for his client on a busy street. He again scored him on a mobile phone. Chen looked for a man with his eyes, hearing nearby the sound of a cellular. It turned out that the girl sleeping at the lamppost called a taxi, that this time did not hear the calling phone at all. Taking a closer look at the girl, the student found that she was pretty drunk. Guanu did not want to take such a passenger to his car, and all responsibility in which case would fall on his shoulders. However, as soon as he thought about it, so 2 men were heading aside to the sleeping girl. One of the strangers was glad of which he wanted to personally look after the person who sought it. His friend began to scream at the girl, trying to wake her with the question of where her friends disappeared. The girl answered the stranger also that she was lagging behind and would not interfere with sleep, which was only an excuse. The man, his comrade, grabbing the person who had drunk by the hand, said that he could not let the girl sleep on the road, offering to go with them. The couple did not want to release such an opportunity and decided to teach the poor fellow, dragging her into the motel. Watching how the events unfolded, the taxi driver left the car to help the girl. The student, with all his might, hit both men with his foot, demanded that they immediately fail. Strangers who wanted to use the girl, terribly scared, having received from the guy. When asked who he was, the student did not answer, instead of which he grabbed one of the men by the face. With all his might, Guan hit the man with his head on the ground, depriving the chance of salvation. Comrade, which also received from the student, asked him not to get excited and discuss everything normally. Chen, hearing him called a friend, he got angry even more, because he would have killed people like them with their own hands. While the young man followed the villains, the girl continued to mutter something through a dream. The student had no choice how to choose a drunk client and accept this order. Putting the girl in a car, the young man hoped that she was not staining his salon during the trip. Having come to his senses, one of the men began to blame Guan, of that he simply wanted to take the girl to himself behind the high, foam words. The taxi driver did not like the comparison with strangers whom he asked to fail while they were still able to walk. Soon, the car rushing at all pairs went zigzag, fitting into the momentum without slowing down. The drunk client still could not restrain everything in herself and stained the salon to the young taxi driver. The student heard some sounds behind him, asked the girl, woke up and felt better. After the young lady was vomiting, she again plunged into a trouble-free dream. Literally after a few minutes, the trip by happiness, Juan, finally came to an end. Leaving the car, the young man was surprised that the girl lived on this street. In front of him, the guy discovered a round-the-clock pharmacy that led Chen into confusion. Returning from the pharmacy, the student agreed to help the client get home, as he was kind today. The girl did not understand why the guy looked at her with neglect, but Guan explained that this was due to the fact that the girl pulled out in his car. I pour water into the girl. The taxi driver reminded her not to forget to take a cure for nausea. Not distinguished by particular modesty, the young man assured the girl that she was very lucky that she met such a good person as he is. Come out to breathe fresh air. The student found that the time was already 3 in the morning. Unfortunately, Guan realized that he would have to sleep in the car that night. The next second, the passers-by that were near the car were very scared due to female screams that came from the cabin. The waking girl with tears began to peel her savior, not stopping shouting loudly. The student did not like such a client's behavior that he demanded an explanation from her. In the girl's gangstones, the young man looked a bloodthirsty and extremely dangerous person. The drunkard demanded to immediately let her go, because otherwise she would call the police. Pointing to the video surveillance camera, the client threatened the guy that if he begins to dissolve his hands, then all his actions will be recorded. The young man explained that he was a taxi driver who simply completed the order, and to everything else bought the girl a cure for nausea so that she would come to her senses. However, the stubborn client, leaving the car, said that she would check with the doctor, and if her guesses are confirmed, the guy would rot in prison. The student asked the girl not to forget his face, as well as take a photo with the number of his car along the way. The taxi driver told where and in which course he studied. Looking forward to the police. Positioning for photos, Guan assured that his conscience was pure. For him was not about to worry about. The student invited the client to look into his phone upon arrival home, so that she would be convinced of the veracity of his words. In the end, Chen threw the girl the phrase that she was very lucky, because not everyone was as kind as he was. When leaving, the guy threw some box out of the car window, that there was no attention to the alarming passenger. Having carefully viewed the package, the girl was convinced that inside her was a cure for nausea. Having checked the contents of the packaging of the girl, it became embarrassed because she could be mistaken about the driver. In a hurry, she looked into the taxi application to study information about her order. Comparing the license plates of cars, the girl found that they were identical. The passengers became even worse when she realized that she had attacked a taxi driver with accusations of harassment. The girls were embarrassed by the fact that after her behavior, the young man at the wheel now hated her. In less than a few minutes, a familiar number called on the phone, which most likely belonged to drunk passenger. However, the young man at the last moment decided not to respond to a call, not wanting to hear an excuse for his stupid deeds. Instead, the student decided to turn on the radio, even if in his eyes for the passenger he remained an offensive and petty person. Returning to his hostel, Chen was surprised that his neighbors still did not sleep in the room. But as soon as he looked into the room, so he discovered her panties with a photograph hanging in the middle of the room. The photo captured the heroes in shorts that were exactly the same as the student wore. Such a monstrous find was for a young man as a thunder in the middle of a clear sky, piercing him into the very heart. Having waited for the moment, Shun Jingqi entered the room, on whose face an ominous smile flaunted. Lin Jingwei, who approached behind, asked his comrade if he would continue to deny his involvement in the hero in his underpants. Bei Fan would not have learned that his friend was his friend if he had not hung his underpants and dry. Jin Kei offered to supervise not only underpants, but also the fifth point of the hero with their neighbor around the room. He grabbed the underwear from a comrade. Guan repeated that his friends were completely scolded due to some kind of news on the internet. He threw his clothes on the bed. Chen admitted that he was the savior of cinema actresses. Upon learning the truth, Sun asked his friend to tell what it was like to do artificial respiration to attractive actresses. Tired to his knees in front of the student, Jinwei said that from now on his friend was for him as an idol who was kissing with stars. Picking a reporter out of himself, Bai Fan asked Guan what thoughts he experienced during first aid to the beauties. He bit the banana that he had served as an impromptu microphone. The guy replied that his friends stopped fluttering. The same opinions were the neighbors of the students who asked not to yell in the middle of the night, which only prevented people from sleeping. Chen, with a gesture, asked his comrades to shut up, or to behave as quieter as possible. The young man asked his friends to keep their mouths, because if they learn about this news at the university, then the actress fans would not give him a passage. The trinity of students vowed to keep the secret of her comrade, claiming that they were a grave. The next day, the guy sent his father 40,000 yuan to treat his mother, inventing that this money was a duty that his friend returned to him. The classmates, passing by the Guan, noticed that there was a free place near him. The girlfriends of Xiaoxun hinted to the girl that there were a lot of people who wanted to take this place, and therefore, the headman should not miss such a chance. The student said that there was nothing between her and Chen, but the blush on her cheeks spoke the opposite. True, the girlfriends did not want to listen to any conversations and dragged the student to the young man by force. Finding himself near the classmate, the headman asked where his friends were. The guy replied that his friends were still asleep. Who was more interesting in what sport in the Olympics would participate in June. The girl was going to run 100 meters, but could not help but mention that she would have signed up for the gymnastics that she was engaged in the past. The guy made a compliment to the girl, saying that it was because of gymnastics that the headman had such a lovely figure. Feeling as embarrassed as possible, Xiaoxun retentionally replied that her friends had already taken food and she wanted to join them. Hastily running away from the guy, the classmate wished him good luck in the upcoming swim. Pan Zhang, who hid the resentment of the older, called his friend Duna to find out from him about the king's king. Zhang's accomplice said that everything was under control and only he would take his people with their people. The director of the university at the opening of the 9th Olympics asked to award the group of students with applause that they took part in the Olympics. The swimming trunks were so tightly fit that they caused the Guan discomfort, which they already stared with their girlfriends. The headman could not take her gaze from Chen's that he looked completely different without clothes. Pan, who passed nearby, Zhang advised Van to praise the basketball team. Otherwise it was the impression that only Guan was interested in the girl. The presence in the competition of the classmate forced the student to think for what reason he came here. In addition, the young man could not help but notice how the participants in the swim looked at him. Guan decided to hold his ear in the way, believing that the presence of Jiang in the competition was not accidental. But he did not give a sound signal to reflect on this, which called on students to prepare for a swim. Ven learned that the classmate argued to the loss of Guan, putting the best swimmers of the university against him. The young man repeated that he was not in business, since in no way could he influence the draw of the contestants. Friend Sun Wan advised not to pay attention to Zadir, as she was confident in the victory of Chen, whose body was more muscular than the rest of the participants. Sitting nearby, Pan Zhang believed that the girls did not understand anything, and that their pet would lose in 2 scores to his guys. Soon, all participants in the competition took their positions, and some of them still needed before the competition. The coach asked why Dun Tao sailed with his classmates in the same day. Students claimed that there was nothing to do with it, but in addition to repeated that he would not dare to shame the honor of their national team. The coach did not understand the situation and only gave the guys parting words so that they showed what they were capable of. Dun was ready to demonstrate Chen Guanu what was the difference between amateurs and professionals. The student's words caused his opponent a wild laughter, which he hardly managed to restrain. The guy became interested in what made the young man so laugh, but he asked not to pay attention to him. Putting his hand with a gun up, the coach commanded the swimmer to prepare. As soon as a shot was heard, filled with a muffled echo to the room, the students at once dived into the pool. Katya, one of the students, distinguished himself, still continuing to flounder at the very start. Guan, to his chagrin, realized that he had ruined the initial jump, having lost precious time. The classmates were shocked, watching the sudden false of their comrade. Discussions immediately began in the stands that Chen could not defeat the guys from the national team. Then, when she saw with his own eyes how her friend went to the bottom, was upset, because she believed that he could definitely win with such a body. Pan Jiang, meanwhile, filled the headman that if he wins the dispute, the girl will have to invite him to lunch. A student that there is urine began to shout the name Chen Guan to at least somehow cheer him up. Van drew attention to the classmate of Chen, whom Bai once spoke to her. The girl decided that the screams were powerless here, since their common acquaintances most likely never went to swim. Despite the support of a classmate, the guy was still the fourth among all participants. The student did not understand why it was to shout his name when he was almost naked in the middle of such a crowd. Glad that Juan had not seen him now. Looking around, the young man looked around to determine his place among swimmers. Guan was horrified when he discovered to be the last of all participants, but the guy was not at a loss, because she believed that his rivals had no chance. Having dived under the water, the student began to accelerate with incredible speed, catching up with swimmers. He emerged to the surface. The guy suddenly burst forward, leaving his opponents behind. Pan Jiang could not believe this, which was already mentally on a date with the headman Shun. Quickly rowing his hands, Chen approached the favorites of the swim, which were Dun Tao with his guys. Ven also could not believe that Guan held a secret from her, that he knew how to swim well. Based on the wall, Chen caught himself thinking that once he managed to sail away from the marine monster, so the students were not a problem for him. Therefore now the young man also imagined that the same monster was chasing after him that gave him not any forces. Students wondered how the guy managed to catch them in general, not to mention the time spent on this. Dun Tao was horrified when Guan saw next to him that he had recently played behind. The guy was sure that at what pace of Chen would not last until the end of the competition, but still decided to push him. The coach was confused. I don't understand why his student decided to take a chance and accelerate. Also noting the talent of Guan, in a matter of seconds, the young man managed to escape forward, overtaking the swimmer of the university national team. The headman did not stop supporting the classmate. He was more strongly angry with Jiang sitting behind. Van realized that he was very mistaken in his friend, who swam like a sea monster. The student stayed behind his rivals, did not know fatigue, ready to continue the swim and for a long time. Meanwhile, the Dun Tao, who watched his back, was already grabbed the air with his mouth, taking his defeat. Suddenly, her uncle's hand lay on Wen's shoulder that he began to read his notations again. The man insisted that her acquaintance, her niece, was not as simple as it turned out at first glance, and she should beware of the guy. Ven said that she knew her friend well, and asked if his uncle managed to find out what Guan was poisoned earlier. A relative repeated that he sent people to investigate this matter, which also seemed strange to him. The niece was alerted to hear the word of the uncle, so she asked him to explain in more detail what exactly embarrassed him. The man repeated that the results of the blood test after poisoning disappeared from the hospital. The girl protested, because the doctors used to say that Chen had serious poisoning, but her relative could not find out anything more. Be that as it may, Juan was still grateful to his uncle for his help. Drying the window, the man said that she was tired of keeping the secrets of his niece, and so that in the future, she herself dealt with this business. The student reminded the student, but she could not think that her friend was somehow connected with some. Wen decided to take the investigation into her own hands, and this time to ask the Guan that he dared to lie to her. Having stopped the stopwatch, the referee screamed a new record of the university in 3 minutes 55 seconds. Satisfied with himself, Chen watched how his rivals hardly got to the finish line. The guy began to mock Dun Tao, claiming that he was really the best swimmer at the university. The loser, although he broke his record, however, lost to the boy, which means he will not receive money for a deal with Pan Jiang. Getting out of the water, Chen Guan did not even suspect that some were already waiting for him. Xin Wenhua head coach believed that the young man had great potential. The student was surprised when Wenhua himself called him to the team, who trained only the best swimmers. The guy has already begun to fantasize that if he made a little more effort, he will soon become the world champion, gaining glory and wealth. Having attacked the coach, the student was interested in whether he could become a swimming champion. The man repeated that only after zealous work the guy would be able to perform at the Olympics not earlier than 3 years later. Chen thought that the Olympics was also held this year, which means that he had no need to wait for 3 years. For the Olympics, the requirements were much higher, so Guan decided not to risk and continue friendship with the director to become an actor. The young man stated that the swimming was only a hobby for him, and that it was better to take a closer training session at the Dong of Tao, who was injured. The comrades of the aforementioned student carried him barely alive, just towards the winner of the swim. At the sight of his opponent, the veins were swollen on Tao's head from tension. Chen asked the swimmer if he really wanted to lose to him in fist sparring. The student would not compete with Guan, because if it were not for the agreement with Pan Jiang, his life would not be destroyed. The owner of the Magic Cup had nothing to add to the opponent, who already got during the competition. The headman sarcastically noticed that Pan Jiang had to approach the classmate and apologize to him, and better to his friends. The guy is unable to listen to insults in his address anymore. He said that he should apologize to Chen, having a spare plan in case of loss. Leaving the university, Guanu could not believe that several girls approached him and took his phone number. Suddenly, Ajun appeared in front of the guy with Jiang that he was not glad of a classmate. The student portrayed that he was pleasantly surprised that the local basketball star had time to visit the swimming tournament. Holding himself up, the guy repeated that now was not the best time to give free rein to emotions. The student congratulated Guan on the victory, claiming that this year he became the champion of the entire group. Hearing from the bully to climb like that, the young man considered that he inadvertently hit his head. Pan Jiang still exploded, who could not listen to the mockery of Chen, while he himself tried to establish disagreements between them. The student decided that there was something unclean, and the classmate hardly began to apologize to him, but decided to play along with him. But at this very moment, Qin Yuanhua rushed to the guy, who did not leave an attempt to recruit the young man to his team. The classmates remained standing still, watching the national team's coach chased after their comrade. Zhang admitted his defeat, also added that he had grown over himself, to which the headman replied that the guys would continue to do without quarrels. Suddenly, the guy said that even if he had won the dispute, he would still apologize to Guang. The young man replied that he was so sure of his winning, that he had already booked a table in a restaurant in which they did not return an advance payment. Studying the textbook, Chen caught himself thinking that if the goddess leaves the mug, then by this time he would not afford. The guy from Stormy Fantasy was torn off a sudden phone call that returned him to reality. The old man, who still had not returned home, turned out to be the calling, and which could not be called. It turned out that Chun went to dinner with Pan Jiang, but Guanu had no care of this. Having finished the conversation, the guy decided that the whole situation with the restaurant was very strange. Unable to personally get through to the headman, Chen decided that he really had to shake something unexpected. Having quickly gathered, the young man also took a magic goblet with him just in case. At this very moment, in the corridor of the hostel, the acquaintances of Pan Jiang walked. Having met students, the guy suggested that they were obliged to know where their comrade disappeared. He jumped over the railing. Guan ordered the company of the guy to stop immediately. Having landed, the young man asked where their acquaintance Pan Jiang was now. Students not only refused to answer the question, they also began to insult the young man who arose before them. The main one of the Trinity ordered his comrades to immediately deal with the insolent, but instead of pouncing on Shalin, the comrades of Jiang themselves received from him. Two guys decided to take revenge on a friend, while attacked an upstart. As it turned out, students also did not have special skills, the blows of which Guan dodged without any problems. He grabbed the opponents by the head. The guy pushed them with his foreheads, which turned out to be more than enough. Repeating his question, Chen found out that his classmate invited Steros to Qingyi Swan. Didn't the young man ask the hooligans to pray that everything was in order with his girlfriend? Having discarded the faithful dogs of Jiang Chen, he rushed to the restaurant in order not to lose time. As soon as the threat passed, the beaten student decided to inform his comrade about the uninvited guest. The guy was very surprised when he did not find a mobile network, not immediately realizing why this happened. In fact, the wine was a blocking network that bought Pan Jiang himself, so that no one would interfere with his date. The classmate asked the girl to try special snacks that improved appetite. Xiaoxun also noticed that a mobile network had disappeared somewhere, and after Poing decided to go home. But instead of appetite, the headman began to circle the head, which was part of the plan of her friend. Pretending to worry about the girl's condition, Jiang decided to check how she felt. Referring to sudden fatigue, the student said she would be better to go home. Holding back to the older that she tried to break out of his hands, Pan Jiang repeated that she did not need to hurry and they had a lot of food. The guy admitted that he ordered a room with sound insulation, advising Sun to sleep, after which she would be better. With a wild gleam in his eyes, the young man believed that the headman herself was to blame for what had happened. Jiang was convinced that she herself provoked him to such actions, who intended to take responsibility for her after today. However, the student's fantasies remained fantasies, because Chen Guan stole into the room. Finding himself alone with Pan Jiang, the classmate expressed his contempt for him that he arranged such a mess. With one sharp blow, the guy drove Jiang away from the helpless Xiaoxun. In his defense, the student repeated that the girl simply fell asleep, and he did not think to do anything with her. Guan, worried about his friend's health, hastened to check how she felt. However, a friend of Chen did not want to let the classmates so easily. He finally decided to properly entrust one of them. The presumptuous young man surprisingly missed, and he himself received from the opponent on the nose. Pan Zhang twisted his face in a dissatisfied grimace, who still did not know that he had to wash his own blood. The owner of the magic glass began to shower the wretch with a series of strokes, simultaneously reporting him for vile actions. With difficulty blocking the attack of Guan, the classmate did not understand where his acquaintance learned to fight like that. Taking advantage of the moment, a beaten student grabbed a bottle of alcohol from the table. But Pan Zhang did not use the weapon, receiving a crotch from the opponent. The student, who was sleeping his classmate, burst into a wild cry, which was interrupted by selected curses. Unable to cope with the pain, the scoundrel collapsed to the floor, also breaking a bottle that he held in his hands a second ago. The waitress who ran into the room demanded immediately stop the showdown, otherwise she would call the police. Guan was not mined for an employee of the restaurant to call the police who would deal with a villain, sleeping a girl's sleeping girl. Not comrades Chen arrived at the room that they were concerned about the message of their friend. The student said that their classmate pumped up the old sleeping man with sleeping pills, asking him to take the poor girl to the hospital as soon as possible. Noticing that Guan was in the restaurant, Bai Fan specified him if he was going to go with them. The young man was forced to stay faster after the police to tell them how everything really was. Giving signs of life, Pan Zhang repented of his deed and asked him to call an ambulance. After the police visited the restaurant, the student was given to the site to testify. The woman investigator asked the young man the most banal question, wanting to find out why Chen beat his acquaintance. The guy answered as it is, that Zhang gave his sleeping man sleeping and intended to abuse her. The police officer was indignant because the student had no right to cripple his peer, which was one of the elementary rules of the law. However, instead of listening to the investigator, the guy's thoughts were busy with something else. Marking how well the uniform was sitting on a woman, the guy noted the attractiveness of a police officer. The investigator said that after a blow in back, the victim had big health problems. The partner Wu Tong advised the woman to relax a bit and continue the interrogation himself. The young man claimed that he was a law-abiding citizen, and the victim wanted to break his head into a bottle. The investigator remaining the partner, the guy willingly went to cooperate with the investigation. Wu Tun clarified at Tan Ying, working in the hospital, if the girls really gave sleeping pills. But the girl with a guilty look asked to repeat the question she asked. As she listened to him, the police officer began to report to the girl, reminding her that she was a doctor of science and participated in a police investigation. The doctor repeated that the tests showed butyrates in the urine, claiming that Pan Zhang had exactly sprinkled sleeping pills for the girl. Despite the fact that Guan was not to blame for anything, Wu Tong still did not want to make life easier for the guy. Suddenly, the mother of the victim burst into the office of the police, who offered to kick Chen in response, and then put on life. The officer informed the relative that everything was not so unambiguous, and Pan Zhang gave his classmate sleeping pills, which was still required to investigate. The angry woman that her son could not do this, after which she began to insult the guard of the law, turning to persons. Wu Tung demonstrated evidence, also asking the woman not to tell her how to investigate. But Mrs. Pan stated that the girl herself stuffed herself with pills to destroy the life of her son. At this moment, classmates came that they decided to clarify the officer with whether the food with alcohol evidence of Zhang's guilt. The police officer was surprised that Guan's friends were so seriously approached by his comrade. The injured Xiaoxun appeared in the appendage to the above, claiming that Chen did nothing illegal. The girl said that her friend hit Pan Zhang only to save her. The mother of the victim screamed at the headman, accusing her of trying to seduce her son. But at the very last moment, the woman's group intercepted, and she did not manage to make the plan. Having discovered the policeman, the woman apologized for being disturbed and for a moment lost control of herself. A relative of the victim announced that she called a lawyer to deal with Guang, while Wu Tun, as soon as she found out, allowed Xiaoxun to go and how to relax. However, the girl was not going to return to the hospital until the police released her friend. Exhausted from boredom, Chen hoped that the Lord of 3,000 Dimensions force his test to come while he was in custody. The young man revived when Wu Tong came in, which confirmed his innocence, as the test showed that Pan Zhang was poured sleeping pills. But the police could not let go of the guy, since his classmate was not yet proved, while Guan was detained at the crime scene. Tired of sitting locked up, the student pleaded guilty and offered to cover the costs of Zhang's treatment. The young man did not end there, and the police announced that the guy was detained. Chen was shocked when he found out that he needed to sit out for another 15 days. In the air next to the guy, A GU appeared that she asked him to beg for help she could provide. The young man repeated that now there was a wrong time, and he was not ready for the next test. The goddess recalled that this did not depend on her, and that the glass himself sucked its owner when he was ready for a new test. The presence of the mistress only confirmed this, which is why the student burst out a mournful groan. Then he hit his head on the table, which greatly scared the police officer, which was with him in the room. The woman explained that this was a regular procedure, and that she would agree with the university for the duration of his absence. Wu Tong promised to get the computer to a guy who continued to sob, stating that the police did not understand his suffering. Finding himself again inside the mug, the student we defended that the goddess would force to spend tens of thousands of years in prison. Teached by bitter experience, the girl began to hide behind, because she did not like when they stared at her. Guan demanded to behave more serious with him, because if he fails during the test, then Gyu would also suffer. The girl accepted the guy's call and intended to demonstrate to him how the goddess actually looked. Suddenly, a gigantic copy of the Measurement Lords appeared in front of Chen that all was burning with force and power. Looking at the owner of the cup, the girl asked if he doubted the house that she was a real goddess. Having fallen to his knees, the student admitted to the superiority of the Gyu, that a break of the girl's divine power was bowed. After the young man saw the true appearance of the lady, she allowed to call her a glass goddess. Guan thanked the glass goddess because she forgave him, but did not understand why she left him if the glass did not restore strength. The girl decided that the guy was in danger, disappointed in him, because the gods were locked for billions of years, and he was different because of several days. The guy claimed that mortals lived many times less than the gods, and for him the loss of such days would adversely affect his film career. The girl, having copied the forces for entering the internet, decided to take pity on Guan and help him. The student became interested in how the goddess will be able to rescue him from imprisonment. Glaps upstairs, the guy watched how he began to suck into his world. The police officer was delighted when she discovered that the suspect would finally begin. Suddenly, the officer said that Chen was better to let go, because about one thought, he could put him in fainting. The guy did not believe his happiness, so just in case, before asked if he was really free, the woman repeated that if the guy does not disappear immediately, then she may change her mind. The young man was pleased with the work done by the work of the goddess. Hastily leaving the police station, the woman did not understand what was happening to her. But if Guan spends at least a little time with her, then she would completely soften. Freed from the custody, the first thing the student met with the head of the group. Xiaoxun was curious how her friend managed to get out of the site, as sodium officers refused to let him out. The student will explain that I agreed to cover the costs of treatment, and be a fine that it will cost it a total of 10,000 yuan. The girl's eyes fell on a mug in the hands of a classmate, which always dragged her with him. Jun asked to look at her, and the guy handed her to his friend without a second thought. The drawing, which flaunted on the mug, made the old man be embarrassed, bursting with paint. The girl, returning the object to his owner, hastened to say that he would see him tomorrow. The guy wondered why looking at an ordinary mug, trying so sharply blushing. The student was very surprised when, instead of a girl in old-fashioned clothes, he found a Gu in underwear. Chen did not understand why the glass goddess, instead of a primary dress, dressed up in a bikini. It turned out that the girl looked so due to the fact that she spent a lot of effort on manipulating with the feelings of a police officer. The Lord of the Measurement stated that she needed to accumulate energy and appear the next time before the start of the test. The student tried to reach the girl, but she no longer got in touch. In order to somehow let off steam, Guan began to poke a finger in a drawing on a mug. Returning to his hostel, Chen heard his neighbors in the room noisy. Open the door, the guy decided that friends loudly discussed how to get him out of prison. It turned out that something caused by the comrades Guan was a noise due to the computer game in which they lost. Confidence in classmates has changed a lot after Chen saw their attitude towards himself. Without a twinge of conscience, Bai Fan invited a friend to join them, that he could have time to play 3 more rounds with them. What indifferent attitude was even more angry with Guan, who refused to play with his comrades on a cut. Well, after this speech, the students, as if nothing had happened, continued to play, not paying attention to the neighbor in the room. Walking between friends sitting at computers, Chen periodically looked at their game. In the end, the student could not resist and opened the laptop, deciding that he would join his comrades in the new round. The next day, Guan bought a cover for his mug that hid a half-naked goddess on her. The student who came to run competitions had to take only a pink cover, since there were no others in the store. Bai Fan began to mock a friend's purchase, who had already stuck his mouth for his words. The student insisted that if a comrade did not stop mocking, he would seal him in his nostrils. The attention of the young man was attracted by the contestants of the upcoming race, among whom were his acquaintances. In one group were Ven and the headman of the Shaoxun group, who did not like each other. Sent the patch. Bai suggested that a friend wanted his girlfriends to be in different groups. Having clutching the patch in place, Guan said that he was not dealing with the competition, and both of his acquaintances were not necessarily in love with him. Preparing for the race, Wei drew attention to Chen's girlfriend, for whom it was important to beat her. The referee shot at the sky, which gave the command for the participant in the race to start. Among all the participants in the first seconds, Van escaped ahead, leaving behind the rivals. The girl fled slowly at her pace, not guessing that Sun was behind her. The headman of the group, in which Chen studied, made every effort to keep up with the competitor. Guan worried more for Sun, which laid out on the full, unlike Wen. The finish tape expectedly crossed Van meanwhile, as the second place was taken by Xiaoxun. Having reached the finish line, the elder, exhausted, fell to the ground, hitting her hand very much. The winner of the race, who had arrived, wanted to help a tripping girl. However, the headman did not want to accept help from the rival, to which her friends were already racing. Van met with a girlfriend, Chen Guan, which was already in the hands of a classmate. Between the girls who competed not only on the sports track, a hostile spark flashed. Accompanying her friend, the classmate began to blame the winner of the race of what happened. The student, who caused the enmity between the girls, decided to escape from the competition as soon as possible, until he got it. Bai Fan stopped his comrade. "I am interested in. Would he not go to the headman to sympathize with her?" The guy replied that he had urgent matters, although he asked to find out that Wan had been talking about Xiaoxun. "A friend fully understands the feelings of a comrade," said that he could be counted on. The quarrel between the girls was not so important for Chen, who needed to give money as soon as possible for the treatment of Panya. Suddenly, the investigator called the student, whose call he expected soon. The young man replied that he was now busy to speak, but Wu Tong replied that she had paid a debt instead and was about to come to him. Guan took that he would definitely return the money, although he was actually in no hurry with this, intending to torment the woman as she tormented him. After some time, the second round of swimming competitions took place at the university. As in the first round, this time Chen won again, leaving his rivals with his nose. Students took care of the guy so that they would call him a torpedo Guang, chanting his new nickname. But the swimmer himself did not like such a nickname, which brought him to some horror. The elder of the group came to support the guy, stating that it was not for nothing that she was sick for him. Guan asked what the girl was doing here after an injury that came to the competition because Bai Fan told her everything. The girl explained that she just wanted to win, but her voice sounded strange, most likely due to the fact that Van had said to her, students could not talk normally, as again a coach appeared on the horizon, who wanted to recruit a swimmer into his team. The young man asked Xiaoxun to take care of herself, after which he ran from all his feet. Looking after the escaping friend, the classmate did not know exactly how to explain to him what happened. In order not to rack his head, the student decided to personally find out everything from Wan that she had said to the headman. Guan asked a friend if she had said something superfluous, that he could put him in an uncomfortable position. But the student told me that Chen told her a lot, because of which the girl could misunderstand everything. A friend said that the guy had not met anyone for a long time, so she decided to help him get closer to Xiaoxun. The student also recalled that Guan had completely blossomed, and had not devoted little time to studying the English language lately. From the monologue of the girl, Chenya was most interested in how she found out that he was in the sight. Sitting behind the wheel, the student reassured himself that he could not worry about English, as he still wanted to promise a kiss. Wutun did not believe in the excuses of the guy, and therefore decided to wait for his appearance near the university. Next to the police, the characters were loomed, on the heads of which were in various hairstyles. The woman immediately drew attention to a group of guys, one of which was armed with a baseball bat. The officer believed that if a group of hooligans arranges a brawl, then her partner's phone call will be enough. Meanwhile, Guan enjoyed a large number of orders, which will help him pay the glow of the classmate. But the student began to rejoice ahead of time, because the strange company was just waiting for its appearance. The guy was alert when he found strangers standing in the middle of the road. One of the members of the group was armed with brick, which was waiting for a convenient moment. Chen noticed how a man wanted to throw a brick into him only when he drove closer to him. With all his strength, he flew into the windshield of a car, which was the wheel of which Guan was. Getting out of the car, the guy was ready to deal with the hooligans that they ruined his transport. Previously, the young man wanted to score the maximum number of points in the computer game, but now he dreamed that Wu Tong appeared in front of him. A police officer who was waiting with the hooligans of the student turned to them, ordering them to immediately stop. The woman was outraged that the hooligan had enough arrogance to engage in vandalism directly by the police officer. The student already regretted his desire, which immediately came true, because now he will not be able to beat anyone with her. A man who had thrown a brick in a car became interested in a police officer, promising to approach her, as he would deal with the guy. His comrade advised the policeman, do not build himself a heroine, and to leave until he gave her the opportunity to escape. Having covered the Guan, Wu Tong said that the guy was under her protection, and the hooligans would not greet if they touched him. The student was pleased that he was protected, but he was sure that he was far from so weak. The leader of the gang ordered his people to deal with the student, while he would take on the girl. Armed with a folding club, Chen was ready to break the faces of the hooligans in response to the glass of the car. Suddenly, the police officer grabbed the guy's weapon, saying that she would come in handy. The gang participants did not wait anymore, attacked Wu Tun and Chang with weapons. Skillfully wielding a borrowed club, the police disarmed one of the hooligans. But with a friend of the attacker, the woman figured out her own, hitting him in the stomach. The student himself joined the brawl, that he deftly scattered vandals with bare fists. Leaning against the young man, the officer invited him to leave. I assured that she would cope with the villains. The police officer invited the guys to her, stating that none of the gang knew how to fight. Wu Tung insisted that the student leave, swearing, which would force the hooligans to pay for the repair of his car. Soon, the last of the gang sent to the ground fell to the ground by letting the blood out of the nose. The officer, along with the student, dealt with the majority of the present hooligans. The main one had to take the situation into his own hands that armed with nunchucks rushed at the woman. Blocking the opponent's blow, the police appreciated the attack, suggesting a man to try again. Referring to the lack of medical insurance, Guan decided to leave the battlefield. Before the student had time to run far as the vandal's fan dog stopped him, showering his sharpnesses. Having learned anything from the experience of their comrades, hooligans with fists attacked Chen. Literally a couple of seconds later, both guys were knocked out, paying for their arrogance. The remaining guy with glasses, the student neutralized his foot with a blow to his face, knocking him off a fashion accessory. Chen Guan looked for vandals like a devil in the flesh, sparkling with his crazy look. Leaning against the leader of the gang, the guy discovered that he was picked up by a cone from a police officer. The bully decided that Pan deceived them when he gave only 10,000 for a guy who actually knew how to fight. The battered vandal invited the accomplice to make his legs, but Guan also heard his proposal. The student repeated that the criminals would not go anywhere, because he had already called the police outfit. In a matter of minutes, the reinforcement caused by Chen was at the scene. One of the participants in the gang, watching how his comrades were taken to the site, decided that they had come to an end. The Tun officer followed that all the culprits of the fight proceed to patrol cars. Right over your hand, the woman reminded that the young man had saved the life, which was a suitable moment for the return of the debt. Guan pretended that he did not understand what was talking about, because he did not have that kind of money with him. The policeman in a good way asked the guy to stop dulling, otherwise she would be forced to use force. Showing an empty wallet, the student showed that he had not a penny, offered to give a debt another time. Since Chen had no cash, the officer offered to pay him a card, demonstrating the terminal. The young man heavily entered the bank card number, but Wu Tun tried to encourage him that hooligans would pay for the car repair. When it came to the vandals, Guan put forward the theory that they were sent by Pan Jiang, who hid the grudge against him. When asked where he had such thoughts, the guy sighed heavily, saying that he was not so stupid, because he managed to enter the university. The police officer ordered himself to be quiet, promised that the family of Pan Jiang would no longer bother him. The student wanted to leave. How Wu Tong asked why he was forced to work in a taxi. After Guan spoke about his mother, the police suggested returning the money until the young man is able to give it away. The woman became embarrassed because she did not know what problems in the family had Chen, prematurely slandering him. The guy refused help, claiming that it was better to accumulate the amount himself than to walk in debtors. Without protesting, the officer said that she needed to return to the station. Tanai joked at his colleague that she liked the suspecting guy. The woman did not agree, explaining that the last time she was not in herself, but today she was going to punish him properly. Wu Tong claimed that if not for Jiang, a gang hired by Jiang, she would certainly have broken Guanu, but in a single word of a partner did not believe. Due to the fact that the student violated her plans, she wanted to properly punish him, thereby noting all her anger on him. In the early morning, the officer woke Chen and told him to go down immediately. And in order for the young man to move faster, the investigators threatened that she would tell everyone, as if the guy had urinated in bed. Deprived of at least some choice, The young man hurried to the police officer so that she would not make stupid things. Wu Tong praised herself, as she had already disclosed the murder case, and was intended to soon close the case regarding Panya. The officer told Xiaoxun that the girl was mistaken, claiming that Chen would never rise to such an early. The headman did not like how the policeman behaved with her friend, seeing in her an opponent for the heart of Guan. Wu Tong could not help but notice that the guy was lushing a mug everywhere, and even in such a strange case, for which she shamed the student. Due to the fact that the young man only got up, he was too lazy to argue with the police, so he simply said nothing. Instead, the student asked the health of the classmate that she felt great, and Wu Tun at that time watched the guy and the girl talk sweetly, just shining with happiness. Feeling herself abandoned, the woman ordered students to follow her rather. Meanwhile, in the ward of Panjiang, his parents were on duty near the bed of the victim. The head of the family suggested calling the classmates of his son and finding out how Chen Guan was doing. A beaten student was delighted when he found out that his father sent someone to his offender in order to teach him how to do it. Suddenly, the door of the chamber swung open, and the police officers Wu Tun and Tan Ying entered it, behind which there was a pleased Guan. The woman accused Mr. Zhang of trying to murder and ordered her to proceed. The man demanded a phone call promised to him to contact his lawyer. The police officer brought Pan Zhang to the crime since all the evidence was against him. The student was indignant at how the police allowed himself to discredit the name of his family. The victim's mother attacked law enforcement agencies, protecting her husband with her son. Wu Tong broke the woman and advised her to remain silent, after which she read out her rights. In addition, the officer will establish a spouse's attitude to the case of the disappearance of one engineer who previously worked with the suspect. The head of the family understood that now he could not get out and had to pay for the deed. Mother Panjiang yelled about injustice, claiming that her family did not do anything terrible. The student, listened to the prosecution, was brought to his father, almost fell into a coma from shock. While the police took the suspects, Guan decided to visit his classmate. The young man suggested that he no longer be later apologized until he had lost his mind yet. Smirnoff Chen with a malicious look. Jiang was sure that the guy and the girl would still be paid for what they did with him. The student suddenly felt someone appeared next to him. All sorts of did not cover him in the back. He took the parasite. The investigator stated that it was enough to gloat over the victim. Leaving the walls of the hospital, Guan informed Xiaoxun that only finally ended. The girl did not take a dreamy gaze from the guy whose face did not leave a smile. The student decided that he was getting dirty, but the headman dispelled his doubts, replied that he looked pretty nice. The classmate advised the guy to prepare for tomorrow's swimming competitions. I talk about his popularity at the university. Chen wondered why it was still single. Suddenly the guys found that his friend did not walk next to him, but stopped. The girl did not understand what was required to make the classmate to notice her feelings. Opening the closet in his room, the student looked at the armor, which was needed for the role in the film. The guy was rabies because the director did not call him, although he had previously promised that he would make it possible to earn 100,000 yuan. Guan decided to remind himself of himself, but the number he had not replied that he only upset the young man more. Chen began to tear off anger at the toys, saying that he would make the deceiver eat his hair. At this very time, at the Merit's film studio, Xiaogan accused his costume that he managed to lose expensive armor. After the director was reminded of the case of a young guy, the man, having forgotten about him, decided to call him right away. The man greeted the student. I will also remind him who he was about their previous meeting. Guan replied that he almost forgot the man and was already waiting for his call. Meanwhile, he himself squeezed the toy with force. Xiaogan asked the guy to come and take armor with him, saying that he would arrange the promised filming. But the student did not hit the film studio, colliding at the entrance with its protection. Guan insisted that he was invited by the man himself, demanding an explanation why they refused to let him go. The guard notified that a special pass was needed for the passage, otherwise it was impossible to get to the studio. To his happiness, Chen discovered the participants in the film crew that were heading in their direction. They turned out to be girls Zhang Yage and Jin Yue, next to whom their manager was walking. The student, however, like the guard himself, could not believe that two popular actresses personally came behind him. Turning to an employee of the film studio, Guan repeated that he was a noble guy, and he had no reason to lie. Having met with their savior, the girls were on him alternately. The cinema stars did not forget to introduce their manager Zhou Yun, which was also glad to get to know the student. Jinya invited the guy to go after filming a cup of tea, but Guan repeated that he had only helped out beautiful ladies that they were in trouble. Hiding embarrassment, the girl insisted that they had to thank her savior. Jiang Yage wedged into the conversation, with a statement that they would call the guy Guanem if he was not against it. Despite her eyes with Chen, the actress said that they could be addressed as Yue and her beloved Yage. Unable to withstand such pressure, the guy waved from the girls, claiming that for a start he needed to meet with Melon Shugen. The actress manager asked the young man not to pay attention to the girl who loved to joke. But Jiang still did not calm down, calling the student sweet, meanwhile, as the girls hardly restrained her. Sometime later, the filming team, properly prepared, began the filming process. Jo Won was thinking about how to thank the guy for a long time, and in the end, she decided to give him a check. The student could not believe that he was awarded the amount of 100,000 yuan, that he had never previously cashed such large checks. The managers understood that it was risky than a novel with stars of such a size. Confident that it was better to solve this issue with money, however, the young man failed to get this money, which at the last moment grabbed Jiang Yage. The manager's indignant act, the actress began to report her, although she actually understood what she had arranged. The latter's colleague took her partner here, Jo Yun, advising her to return to the shooting. The annoyed woman said that they came up with another way to thank the student. The assistant Chen, who was sent by the director of the film, appeared immediately, which will help the guy get acquainted with the script. Guan began to build a great actor out of himself, since the director himself allocated him a personal assistant. The next few minutes, the grimer worked on the student, preparing him for the light of the cameras. It turned out that the assistant did not have time to tell the guy in detail about everything, wondering if acting was in him. The young man replied that for 2 weeks he read a lot of books about this, wanting to play the 30-second scene properly. Having rejoiced at such a news, the student's personal assistant decided to immediately start filming. Almost 2 hours have passed since the scene with the participation of Guan, which still selected the desired image. Having demonstrated his game, the assistant was horrified, claiming that the face of an evil man looked completely different. The young man took into account all the wishes and instructions of the worker of the film studio, but this time did not cope with the task. The guy suddenly realized that his assistant had just called him the acting of mediocre his acting. Tired of the students shouting, the man was sure that the guy only learned to portray one famous grimace. By this moment, the main actresses of this film returned back to the student. Guan believed that the girls wanted to give him even more money when the assistant hoped that the actresses would pull up his acting skills. Zhang Yag first cheered the student, because he had a chance to become famous. But Chen wanted to see the desired money more. Jinya drew attention to the fact that young Tao looked exhausted, asking if he had problems during the filming. The man seriously asked the girls to help him, claiming that the student was complete mediocrity. To defend the students, the Yaga in love with him became, threatening to erase anyone who does not harm him into the powder. Well, after an hour of stubborn efforts, the girls, just like the assistant, desperate, unable to make an actor out of a young man. A colleague in the workshop advised her friend to stop, because all attempts were in vain. Zhang advised her lover not to be upset, claiming that if he did not succeed in acting, he was magnificent from other things. No matter how much money would like money, but he could no longer endure such a shame. Listening to all this from lovely ladies, the guy wanted to apologize to the director, but he himself called him to him, announcing the beginning of official shooting. Guanu became so embarrassing that he asked the glass goddess in an acting test. Unfortunately, the guy left a mug in the car from behind the cover that he was worn on her. The melon of Xiaogan repeated that the guy had behaved like a hero before, not believing that he would not be able to play pathetic half a minute. The shooting of the picture nevertheless started, and the student, scared to the horror, was put on the horse. After an unsuccessful double, the director asked to take a scene with the participation of a young actor. Whatever face the student ended, the director did not like how he played out the character. The assistant director asked him to take a break, since the entire film crew was very tired. The young man asked for forgiveness from Xiaogan, who was ashamed to torment the entire film crew due to some 100,000. The man assured that the student was not to blame and wanted to try a couple of times, because if the young man leaves, the director could greatly suffer. Xiaogan, along with Guan, witnesses as Yage quarreled with the performer of the main male role of Zhou. The actor did not deny the courage and heroism of the guy, but he repeated that he would never become an actor. The director of the picture ordered the actor to shut up, as it was his decision to make a guy in his film. On the set for a short period of time, a grave silence appeared. The man asked the student not to pay attention to the actor, because the last word always remained for the director. The young man did not want to delay anyone else, and therefore offered to remove only one scene, resorting to the abilities of the goddess. The bitchheads of Xiaogan announced a 10-minute break, after which the actress in love with him immediately appeared near Guan. The girls said that they had very little time, wanting to start training as soon as possible. Chen, if he refused, referring to the fact that he was not used to playing in front of the crowd and a bunch of cameras. Joe argued with a student at 80,000 that when he would return to the set, he would remain the same mediocrity. Returning to his car, Guan strictly asked for help from a glass goddess. Looking at the drawing, Chen discovered that the girl remained motionless, deciding that she was pretending. Then the guy played the scene, as if he really wanted to go to the toilet, and he was nowhere to be nearby. Unlike the film, the student played this role to the end, taking off his armor. Yeeting, staring in the sun, I heard the owner of the circle perfectly that he threatened her, but decided that he bluffed. But the girl was convinced of the serious intentions of Guan when she saw the sun began to obscure his organ. The goddess was indignant that she was busy developing the next test, while an ungrateful guy was engaged in blackmail. The student asked the master of measurements to give him an acting test to win the dispute of 80,000 yuan. The captive of the mug claimed that Guan's abilities were not enough to go through the test, advising him to give up. Chen managed to put on Madame Gu that she agreed to help him. But in exchange, the young man should not remove the case from the mug. The guy agreed to any conditions, if only the glass goddess hurried to the task. The girl insisted that if she takes the mind of Guan under control, that next time the mug's piled improperly. A smug student returned to the set in high spirits. Young Tao, along with the actresses, did not understand where the guy got so much self-confidence. The whisper of Guan recommended that he practice so as not to lose in the sport of Zhou, but the young actor did not need this. Looking at the actor, the student could not wait for the moment when he sees his physiognomy by winning the dispute. The melons of Xiaogan announced the whole team about the end of the break, in the hope of lifting the unfortunate 30-second scene. The director until the last believed that it was not for nothing that he called the guy to this role. While Zhou was already ready to accept a large sum from the young man, the goddess reminded that the student would not do anything, since she would take control of him. After the word said, the goddess collected the energy, which she had so accumulated in order to move into Chen's. In an instant, an uncertain student, magically changed in his face. Jinyue and Zhang Yaga were struck by such an unexpected reincarnation of the guy. When, first of all, he ordered the beginning of filming, Guan held in the frame along with other actors. The very scene that he could not rehearse with the assistant, now Chen played as a master of his craft. By watching the material and the observation, Xiaogan could not believe how this was possible. The acting game Guan was so perfect that the man already trembled with delight. The assistant asked the director if his scenes were satisfied, but the man said that he was completely delighted with them. A fan of a student of Yaga praised the work he had done, clarifying that she always believed in him. Chen modestly replied that he was just lucky, even though he thanked the glass goddess in his soul. Jinyue also could not help but note how the guy perfectly coped with the task. Having lost the dispute, I began to blame Zhou primarily of conspiracy with Guan. But the man invited the actor to look at everything with his own eyes. Without looking up from the monitors, the guy was speechless from the acting of his opponent. The Lord of the Magic Cup knew that it was necessary to immediately seek help from the goddess. As soon as Chen recalled for Madame Gu, she immediately appeared, claiming that she was not afraid of difficulties. The girl said that instead of arguing with the guy, it would be better to go preparing for the next test. Noticing nearby the actor with whom he argued, Guan asked how he appreciated his game. Shu began to bow to the student. Along with this, apologizing for his rudeness, the young man reminded the loser of their bets, which the director himself also mentioned, advising the guy not to be upset. With a detached voice, the actor said that the money would come to the student's account soon. As soon as Guan received the money, he immediately called his father, saying that this amount was enough to pay for the mother's medicine up to a year. But it turned out that soon the hospital would have the opportunity to transplant his mother, Chen Pum, which would cost 500,000 yuan. Father insisted that it was a rare opportunity, and it was worth taking advantage of it, with which his son was agreeing with. He hastened to finish the conversation. The student exhaled heavily, because he needed to earn another 300,000. The guy drove off the thought to turn to the captive of the magic cup again. A car appeared next to the student's car with his colleagues in film stakes. At first, the guy did not pay any attention to the car until the girls began to call him by name. Having caught up with the car, Guan discovered the actresses, hanging that it was not a coincidence and something happened. The girls were interested in where the rising cinema star was in such a hurry. The student said that he needed to prepare for the exam at the university, that he was in 2 weeks. Almost falling out of the window of the car, Zhang Yage reported that by chance they also headed to the same university. Students sharply stated that he wanted to stay alone in the entertainment park, where, as he hoped, actresses would not dare to follow. The eyes of the fan of Guan lit up even more when the young man spoke about the entertainment park. Chen with bitterness admitted that he did not want to walk all the famous actresses, wanting to spend a quiet and calm life. The student asked the student to worry, since no one would recognize them in everyday clothes. The other in the place of Guan would be glad of such an adherent, but at the same time an attractive girl. Since the student was still on actresses, he stated that he was in a hurry, and he did not have time for a walk, pressing the gas pedal. The girl in love with the guy was very fushed when she saw that he was moving away from them. Zhang Yaga shouted that she really liked Chen Guan, who had saved them. But the student did not hear the recognition of the actress's love, as he was already very far away. Jinya accused her friend of frightening a young man who, instead of monetary reward, was left with nothing. The movie star did not understand why the guy who attracted her ignored her feelings, unable to put up with it. Following the example of the student, the actress also pressed the gas pedal to the floor to catch up with her lover. The confident Guan was happy that thanks to his taxi driver's skills, he left annoying actresses without problems. However, the machine of the stars of cinema that appeared in the rear view mirror spoke the opposite. Zhang Yag was chasing his lover, on which she completely obsessed. The guy did not expect to see the girls behind him, from whom he was unlikely to be able to leave, since the girls have a quick sports car. Looking into the mug, the student did not raise what kind of light was at its bottom, in which there was ordinary water. Chen guessed when he began to suck in a mug that a glass goddess had come to his aid, the Lord of the Magic Cup. I remember that Madame Gu's last time threatened him to avenge him. The student, being on the alert, turned to the goddess, claiming that she could harm both of them with her tricks. The young man heard the girl's voice, however, could not figure out where he came from. It turned out that Guan came the lord of 3,000 measurements on his face, that she asked him to remove his leg. Having exploded with indignation, the goddess began to report the student, because he dared to step on her face. Chen began to make assumptions why the gods were accepted to bury himself in the ground. The girl replied that in order to take possession of the guy's body, and had to hurry all her spiritual energy, as well as lose her swimsuit. The goddess always mocked the guy, so he had an ideal opportunity to take revenge on her. Having scared, the girl said that she had two news, good and bad. But if the guy does something with her, she would only tell you bad. In the expression on the captive of the captive, Guan realized that she was not joking and was seriously configured. The goddess said that the service appeared inside the circle, which will significantly reduce the preparation of the next test. Because of this, the guy could die before the start of the test. But the girl was kind, and therefore carried away some changes to save him. Otherwise, Guan would have to become a death king for hundreds of millions of years, from which the student almost lost consciousness. The young man asked if it was all the news that he needed to hear. The glass goddess nodded, and she herself thought that the next test would definitely receive a disorder. Having discovered a glow over himself, the guy was not ready for a test, as he had not yet taken the opportunity to avenge Mrs. Gu. Having moved to the measurement, the student crawled the car's steering wheel, but the view of everything was pixel, as in a computer game. Guan wondered why everything around was so primitive in appearance. The goddess explained that initially in this world there was a wonderful landscape, but she was forced to change it after the rash actions of Chan. As in the C-test, the guy will have 100 lives, and he will need to complete the tasks by car, and repeated that he would win without problems with so many attempts. But after the 100th times, he would die for real. The student had to get to the radar, retaining a speed of 120 kilometers per hour, but the car passing by overturned it. Turning over, the guy did not die, deciding that so many lives are enough to pass this test. But Chen began to rejoice ahead of time, since a huge truck with a concrete mixer began on him. The car drove through the inverted car, which is why it added as in a cartoon. Despite his ridiculous appearance, Guan that became thin as paper was much more painful to die. The goddess forgot to mention that she added something to the test due to the weakness of the student's will. The girl, as she said earlier, avenged the young men, increasing the feeling of pain twice. The guy began to pour tears, demanding that the captive of the magic mug leave him alone. After 13 deaths, Guan switched to the next level, where he needed to retain a speed of 180 kilometers per hour. To his relief, a young driver could improve the characteristics of his transport. Dissatisfied with the basic speed of the car, the guy decided to increase it in order to quickly go through the level. The student was confident that the most important thing for the driver at great speed was not to be afraid of death. He reached the mark on the speedometer scale. The guy had to hold out at this speed for 20 seconds. Guan was ready to demonstrate his driver's skills before turning, without slowing the car step. Without losing at all in speed, Chen was on the highway for 18 seconds. By maneuvering, the young man managed to align the car at the penultimate second of the test. However, at the 20th second, the Guan car suddenly exploded, which meant repeated passage. Having passed the second stage of the 9, the student promised himself not to press the brake with all his strength. At the next level, the guy could not cope with the management, and he flew from the bridge into the water. At the 4th level, he was clamped by 2 trucks, not understanding what he had to do in this situation. After a series of failures, Chen reached the last test in this dimension. In the end, the guy needed to go through the Dakar rally, so he decided to be more aggressive on the road. The student managed to overtake various rivals and first cross the finish line. The torment of Guan finally came to an end that he had a lot to pay for the theory of the goddess about his willpower. After passing the test, the guy demanded the number of the support of the gods to complain to Mrs. Gu's torture arranged for him. Returning back to the waiting room of the magic cup, the goddess told the guy not to open his eyes, so that the student does not throw anything, as he usually loved to do it. The girl herself pressed his eyelids with her fingers. Since the goddess spent all the power to the test, she could not conjure her clothes. But now, Chen could perfectly control his car. Having sent the young man with a kick to her world, Madame Jiyu advised him to test her incredible abilities in practice. Thanks to the effective test, the student has become a real driving god. Well, even with such skills, Guanu was difficult to break away from the pursuers, whose car was better in characteristics. Suddenly, fitting into the turn, the student decided to lure the actresses on Mount Fansuan, which was the racing track of the city. Yag did not understand why her lover turned her, but Yue suggested that the guy deliberately took them to the mountains, since there were few people there. The manager Zhou Yun, who called the girl, asked to thank Guan differently, as she and her assistants pursued them on 3 cars. The actress's girlfriend replied that she would try to dissuade the Yage, assuring that the manager had nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, at the entrance to Mount Fansuan, a lot of people gathered that they decided to drive. Guan, who arrived at Mount, was noticed by a car familiar to him, which was also on the random country on the racing track. The student had the opportunity to teach one villain that he cut him during the delivery of tofu. Then almost an accident. Chen was afraid not only for himself, but also to scratch the racer. At the wheel of that car was Lao Tiziu that, now seeing the student's car, was surprised at how such a collapse wandered into these lands. Comrade the racer suggested breaking the car of the young man, and the guy wanted to compensate for the damage with pocket money given to him by his father. While approaching the company, Guan was ready to compete with the local racers, despite their sophisticated cars. But the closer the student drove up to the entrance to the mountain, the faster his car accelerated. Local riders were scared, since the taxi driver was not going to slow down, although he saw people standing on the road. The young man switched the gear and pressed the gas pedal to the stop, not going to slow down. Guan car, going to the turn, swept right in front of the very nose of Lao Tiziu. Continuing their turn, the tires of the car began to smoke, covering the riders with the wall of dust. Having entered the Mount Fansuan, the student joyfully stated that drivers swallow dust. For real racers, the Guan's trick was akin to the blow below the belt that covered their mouths from dirty air. Comrade Naba repeated that if the guy was mistaken at least millimeters at the next turn, he would definitely brake. However, the racer who once cut Chen wanted to see the insolent, and it doesn't matter if he will be alive or dead. By grief, the yellow sporty actress rode behind the red car, and the Lao Tzu machine closed the chain. The guy entered a steep turn drifting, and the tires of his car began to spark. Zhang Yaga, that was driving, told her friend that if they also try to go after the guy, they would definitely brake. The girls slowed down, because they did not want to risk their lives. While riders followed Guanem, Jiang asked herself that she really looked so terrible that the guy was so stubbornly trying to hide from them. Jinyue insisted that they nevertheless checked whether something was bad with their savior. The wheels now and then rotated from the side, maneuvering on a dangerous road. A few minutes later, Chen left the mountain track, finally managing to relax behind the wheel. Looking back, the guy wondered why the racers were needed for the results of such sophisticated cars. The student could not stop praising himself, claiming that the arrogant guys could compete with him only in dreams. The young man decided to call the movie star and informed that the further persecution of his person was meaningless. Guan, having contacted Yue, asked to give his girlfriend that he did not want to show with them in public, since they were too famous. Also, the guy added that someday they will have a chance to find a secluded place and how to talk about everything. The actress in love with the student grabbed her friend's hand, asking Chen not to throw the tubes. The actress said that she bought a young man's road to a young man, but Guan replied that he was used to watching the time on the phone. Although the guy did not refuse the gift, just in case I decided to check how much the watch offered to him could cost him. He opened the first online store, a student, as soon as he saw the sum of the bought Yaga brand. His hands instantly trembled. Such an accessory was sold a couple of 100,000 yuan, which was enough to pay for the mother's operation. Chen haunched when he realized that with his thoughtless actions he missed the opportunity to earn such money. Guan was very surprised when he began to call the actress again, amazed at her perseverance. With a stone face, the student accepted the call, learning that the girls were still at the top of the mountain track. The worried Chen tried to find out from the actresses why they had not yet left with Fan Xuan. The movie star, distraught with love, said that if the guy was not needed, then she was going to throw them off the mountain. The driving master managed to get out of a meeting with his popular fans, hiding behind the fact that a couple of riders were chasing him. The student exhaled in relief when he managed to agree on a meeting and take the watch later, for which he would help out the money for the operation. A partner on the site asked Yaga, wasn't it easier to find out a guy's credit card number and send him money? The actress did not suit the actress, because then they will no longer have a reason to meet a talented student. Jinya was sad because her friend did not notice that Guan was only interested in money. Looking in love with her eyes, the girl reported that she so much wanted to see Chen. After some time, the young man again showed his skill on the road, moving away from the chase. Looking back, the student could not imagine that the riders would catch up with him so quickly. The guy underestimated his pursuers, completely losing an account of the time when he talked with the Yag. Putting the gas pedal into the floor, the guy wanted to show how to ride a dirt road. Suddenly hearing a monstrous roar, Guan braked sharply, describing a couple of circles around him. The student was very wary, because his imagination painted the alarming assumptions of what happened. The gang of racer left their car and gathered at the edge of the cliff, where their comrade flew into the water, not managing the management. Also having left his car, Chen Guan armed himself with a folding club, rushed to the aid of the racer. Friends of the driver who fell into trouble attacked a student who intended to beat him. Putting off the bully from himself, Guan stated that while his friend was in a trap, he found time to swear with him. Unhappy with the behavior of drivers, the student asked if they had a waterproof flashlight. Having jumped into the water, the young man caught himself thinking that he only wanted to entrust the dashings, not bringing to this. Chen had to go down to the very bottom at which a fallen car was among the fish and algae. Approaching the car, the young man leaned against the windshield, peering out the driver. On the face of the once formidable Lao Tzu, there was a frightened mind that he tried to break the glass of the drum over him with fists. Twisting by the handle, the student could not open the car door due to air pressure, which created inside. Without thinking twice, Guan grabbed the folding club and swung it with all his might. After that, the guy began to pound on the glass the handle of the baton, from which cracks began to creep on the glass. Having finally breaking the glass, the young man needed to act quickly until the car was filled with water. Chen knocked out the glass with his fist, wanting to get the driver out of the car as soon as possible. Pushing his hand into the salon, the guy did not care and cut on the sticking fragments of the glass. When the student grabbed Lao Tzu, the racer at this moment had already begun to lose consciousness. With a sharp movement, Guan dragged the racer behind him, releasing him from a deadly trap. Getting ashore, the guy grabbed the air heavily with his mouth, and whose driver he saved and completely turned off. The risking Xiaozhong with his comrades asked how Lao Tzu felt. Taking a comrade by the arms, the local gang of riders took him away, not even thanking the student for the assistance provided. The wet Guan in a hurry began to pull on his clothes, so as not to catch a cold. Waving his hand, the young man discovered a cut on her, whom he did not feel due to the action of adrenaline. Inspecting the wound, the guy also remembered that, saving the racer, he lost his club. Throwing his hand, the young man hoped that the wound would not prevent him from driving a car, not noticing how one of the gang came him. The student was scared, because at that moment he was without weapons. Expecting a bully was about to attack him. Having scared, Chen asked the guy to move away, hoping that he would not attack the wounded. Getting on his knee, the street racer took the student by the bandaged hand, causing a numb from him. The guy began to make excuses that although they were chasing him, he was not guilty that their comrade fell into the water. Jun invited the savior to join his group, and the fantasy of Guan began to draw possible options for an unknown community. Xiaojun interrupted Lao Tzu that he had already returned to normal after a recent accident in which he had hit. The guy asked his comrade to stop, claiming that he himself would deal with the driver who had saved him. The gang leader bowed to the student, after which he thanked him for his help, proving that his people were simply worried about him. Chen kindly accepted his gratitude from the racer, asking him to stop saying a feat committed by him. Calling the student of the driving god, Lao Tzu was very worried about the injury he received. Guan stated that he was injured and more serious than this, but the girl from the gang of racers asked to examine the wounded hand. Washing the wound, the girl introduced herself like a bifei, specified that she was a friend Lao Tzu. The student, listening to the writer for a moment, looked at the pendant hanging on her neck. From the beauty of the Orfei young man, his breath caught his breath, and he was hardly introduced to her. The girlfriend of Juna said that Guan was injured almost to the bone, and the saved racer began to blame himself. The young man asked not to kill so much, being sure that he would heal early quickly. He bandaged his hand properly. The racer observed how Chen leads, wanted to ask him about something. The girl, clutching the student's wounded hand, asked to be his student to also skillfully control the car. After that, the whole company began to stuff into students of the driving god, shouting each other. Although the young man did not show, however, the devil inside him found in this a great opportunity to earn extra money. Suddenly, the god of driving took away the bandaged hand from Zhu Fei, which surprised the girl. Guan said that although the whole company wanted to learn from him, it will be extremely difficult to achieve its level. Knocking himself in the chest, Lao Tzu repeated to the guy that they were not even afraid of death, wanting only to drive as quickly as Chen Guan. All as one agreed with the words said by the head of the street gang of riders. Suppressing to his feet, the guy agreed to the request of the racers, but he intended to teach everyone at once. Confident that such money was not a problem for such people, the student announced the price for one training day of 100,000 yuan. Lao Tzu could not believe that the training would be so cheap that his girlfriend had agreed with. Having agreed with the driving division god, the team sat down on cars and left. Having left alone, Guan was at a loss, because he did not specify with the students not the time of the training date. Looking at the injury, the guy wondered why Zifei tied a bandage with a bow. The student needed to explain to the teacher Zhou because of the missed swimming competition, but his car after the chase failed. After Chen called the tow truck, the old acquaintance Zhu Zhifa immediately called him. The student's old friend was the owner of the car, and he was interested in why the insurance company called him, saying that the tow truck was called. On the statements of Guan that the car is in order, Zihi Fa asked to photograph the car from different angles, suspecting Chen of lies. As soon as the guy was seen in the state of the machine, he asked if his friend himself was in order. The student explained that on the way, smoke fell from the car, and he lied only because deciding that Zhu would be sorry for the car. The owner of the car doubted that the insurance would cover the breakdown, so he sent Guanu money for repairs. The young man could not believe in such luck when a sum of 20,000 yuan came to his bank account. The student touched the living that his friend considered him a beggar, which would soon become a highly paid automobile instructor. Having called back to Jigufi, the guy found out that a man was sent to him that his parents would take his parents to the hospital. Having dealt with the car, Guan quietly penetrated the room in the hostel, hoping not to stumble upon their neighbors. But the light instantly lighted up, and Baifan immediately rushed a bandage on his friend's hand. A friend began to pry, where Chen earned such an injury, noting that the bow was to his face. Lin Jingwei suggested that it was because of the wound that Guan could not play with them today. Suddenly, Sun Jingke wanted to take revenge on people what they did with a guy that because of his excitement, he was very sorry for the injured hand. Listen to the history of Guan. Jingwei considered it implausible and advised to visit the teacher Zhou tomorrow due to a pass in the competition. The next day, as if nothing had happened, the guy had breakfast at the university dining room. The meal was interrupted by a phone call, and as a Chen called a ring teacher already guessed, the girl asked the student to go to her office after breakfast, because she knew that the guy had no steam in the morning. Having finished breakfast, the student appeared in the teacher's office, showing her a sick hand. Madame Zhou is excited when she saw the student's bandaged hand. Asking what happened to him, Guan began to tell the story, slightly embellishing the details, claiming that he raced to competitions from the hospital where he visited his mother. Then the guy told the pure truth, as he discovered a drowning car in the river and rushed to save the man that was inside. The teacher, exactly in the same way as the student's friends, did not believe him, who was interested in what other excuses the swimmer invents. Confident in the house that Guan lies, her teacher decided to take him to clean water stretching to the first aid kit. The girl claimed that the guys did not care about themselves at all, as she noticed yesterday's bandage on a young man. Zhu suggested changing the bandage, but Chen repeated that the wound was fresh. I could open if you remove the bandage now. The teacher demanded to look at the bandage, claiming that the student could catch the infection, still not believing in the presence of a wound under it. The guy did not want to remove the bandage so much that he stopped controlling his movements in the moment. Her young man was following himself and accidentally grabbed the teacher, causing a shock in the girl. Realizing what he had just done, Guan pulled his hand as if burning, claiming that he was not on purpose. Clutching his hand to the chest that the student touched, the teacher began to shake with excitement. The face of the teacher Zhou became the crimson with anger, whose confidence that the time was not lying only intensified. To escape from this seemed a hopeless situation. The guy agreed that the teacher would change his dressing. As soon as Chen unwinded the bandages, the wound opened, and the bandages instantly sat down with fresh blood. After making sure that she was mistaken, the girl asked the student to leave the bandage. The guy was forced to endure, because Zhou, at the sight of his injury, would immediately forget about an awkward incident. Almost crying, the teacher convinced the young man to stop unwinding a bandage. The girl, having finished the dressing, said that she called Guan not only because of the competition. Such a statement from the young teacher embarrassed the student that he was cautiously decided to clarify the true reason. However, the teacher did not have time to say anything, as a man entered her office. It turned out to be Director Van Jen, that he asked the girl to go to his office, having some news. The student, to put it mildly, was not happy to meet the head of the educational institution. The man, tired of the student's bandaged hand, specified whether he was involved in a fight with someone. Xiaozhou noticed how the young man reacted to the director's arrival, tried to calm him with a gesture, notifying him that she would return in a couple of minutes. All students did not like Zhenya, who caught the students on the slightest actions blackmail them for his own good. Guan started up so much, dreaming of teaching the director of the university, that he involuntarily hit the patient with his hand on the table. The young man realized his mistake when the injured hand flashed with wild pain, surrendering throughout his body. Soon, when the teacher returned from the director's office, her face is mysterious sad. The young man, worrying about the teacher, asked if Van Jen allowed himself any liberties in relation to her. The girl quickly changed the subject of the conversation, finally reporting that she called the student to herself to talk for an increased scholarship. Over the past 6 months, the guy studied and worked in a taxi in parallel, and in the future, it would be difficult for him to continue in the same spirit. The teacher of Xiaozhou spoke about the scholarship of 10,000 yuan, for which it was necessary to score at least 85 points. Gwen recalled his assessments to the teacher, hinting that he was unlikely to be able to gain such indicators. The young man considered an empty mole of time to memorize each item for the sake of 10,000, when the car instructor would receive 100,000 per day. The girl did not understand where the student had such uncertainty that he had not even tried. Slightly pressing the teacher, Chen ensured that she told him about her visit to Van Jani. The teacher told the student about what happened to the director, but asked not to spread about it. Guan got angry that the director transferred to their group of students in exchange from the Massachusetts Technological Institute. Once again, hitting with anger with his hand on the table, after the young man grabbed her with wild cries. The teacher Zhou could not do anything, and although the elder Shun knew the best of all the problem with academic communication, the student adhered to me that this was too difficult, clarifying whether Van Jen did this before. Such a direct question from her student found the girl by surprise that she did not know how to answer him. Ultimately, the teacher confirmed that 100 similar happened before with her. However, the guy's face glowed joyfully that he had already come up with something in order to prevent the director from committing their plan. The student gave the floor to the teacher that at the meeting on the exchange, he would not talk to them again in English. Remembering the painful years spent on a pirate ship, Chen finally found how to benefit from them. But the words of the young man only frightened the girl more, accusing himself of telling him about stupidity about everything. Madame Zhou had already come to terms with the fact that everything was over, being sure that she could still help the guy, calling him an ambulance. However, Guan noticed that the teacher wanted to call an ambulance, doubting his abilities, which was very offended. Embarrassed, the head of the Guan group silently took out a folder with unknown contents inside it. Suddenly, the girl took out several tests from the folder with the correct results of the answers. The student did not expect this from the teacher, assuring that there were 3 days before the meeting, which was enough to learn. Bai Fan, having learned everything from his friend later, could not believe that such an honor fell to him. Chen's friend recalled that the guy was the only group who did not pass the English exam. A friend of the headman asked Bai Fan not to talk about a classmate in front of Xiao Xun. Sons who arrived in Sun heard part of the conversation, demanded an explanation of what her comrades said. Having found out about everything, the headman asked Guan himself if he was sure that he was to cope. But the young man asked not to worry about it. At this time, the director of the university was looking at the photo of the teacher Zhou. The man could not believe that she allowed the student to perform at the meeting with poor exam results. However, Van Jen decided that he would only be in his hand, that using the moment, he would exclude an upstart from the university. Without stopping admiring the teacher's photograph, the man noted that in the afternoon he stopped more beautiful. 4 days have passed since that moment, and soon the same meeting was to take place. Waking up, Guan felt that he could not move. I do not understand what happened to him. Only looking at his body, the student discovered that all of him from head to toe was tied with a rope. Friends of Chen, preparing papers for a meeting until 5 in the morning, were afraid that their boyfriend would be afraid and decide to escape. So they decided to play it safe and tie him. Without a ceremony with comrade Sun Jingke, he lifted him and, together with his neighbors, went to the meeting with his neighbors. The annoyed Guan repeated that he was untied for a start and not touched his wounded hand. At the meeting of students in the exchange, many students at the university were attended. Representatives of the Massachusetts Institute greeted students in Chinese broken. Bai Fan, meanwhile, prayed to the gods that light spilled on his friend, and he became a master of English. Van Zhen could no longer wait for the main performance with the participation of Chen Guan. The man watched with interest a student who looked quite confident. The director was surprised when the guy began to speak in Chinese, wanting to find out how he would get out further. The classmates with bated breath watched as their friend began his greeting in their native language, fearing the worst. After the introductory word, Guan cleared his throat to prepare for the transition to a foreign language. Starting to talk about the importance of sorting garbage, the young man said all this in impeccable English, as he once talked with pirates on the ship. Friends of Chen could not believe that the guy who filled the English exam managed to take possession of him in such a short time. The director of the university considered it impossible that the guy could speak English with perfect pronunciation. Meanwhile, Guan continued his speech prepared for exchange students. However, the representative of the foreign university objected to the young man, saying that he was a supporter of his previous opinion. Chen answered the man in his language that the problem was due to a number of factors. Sun Jingke did not understand whether Guan really hid his knowledge from them, while Bai was sure that all this was the result of his prayer to the gods. Singing all this time quietly, Xiao Xun deep down believed that her friend would not let down either her group. The man, communicating with the student, noted that he had a medieval European accent, just like the British gentleman. Chen Guan felt his superiority, freely communicating with foreign guests. The student wanted the director to finally forget about the exams, hesitated and bowed before him. Van Zhen shook his defeat, wondering how he now needed to lower the reputation of the teacher Zhou. Vice President Khan asked the director of the university that he was thinking about a capable student of Guan. The subordinate had no choice on how to agree with the Khan, claiming that the guy was very good. After meeting with the exchange students, Chen's classmates demanded an explanation from him. The girls were indignant that a friend carefully hid his skills from them, forcing them to be very nervous during the performance. The headman's girlfriend demanded an explanation from the guy, as Xiao Xun doused her tears, accusing herself that she had taught poorly. Chen's explanation turned out to be quite simple, who wanted to simply surprise everyone after ridicule on the test. The young man hastened to clarify that he was afraid to talk about this at the university, so that they would not be overheard and not brought to the director of Van. Students did not realize that at the corridor at this very moment the audience walked Zhou, Van Zhen, and Vice President Khan. Typically, the quiet Jing Wei was outraged that the director arranged the exchange, while Xin Ke was scratched his fists to entrust the fat man. Gan stated that they had little power, and it was necessary to act reasonably to protect Miss Zhou. Suddenly, there was a voice of the director, accusing students of violating silence. Being beside himself with anger, Jen repeated that the disciples of their gossip produced too much noise. Non-groups aggressively reacted to the remark of the director of the university. What he promised to understand completely, guaranteeing that the fat man would put in such a situation that he would want to fall through the ground. The guy thanked from the entire group of the director, claiming that the exchange students were lucky with the leadership. The man thanked the students, but asked them not to make noise during classes. Khan expressed gratitude to the director for the well-done work when Van barely restrained himself so as not to rude Guanya. The vice president praised Miss Zhu, adding that most likely a new member was added to the committee of the junior league. If the teacher gets into the office, he will receive the full support of the vice president, which Chen could not keep silent about, teasing over Van. The director of the university announced that he had fallen sugar in the blood, because of which he decided to hastily retire. Khan could not understand what actually happened to his subordinate, who previously spoke of a sick heart, and now complained about sugar. In the university dining room, classmates asked Guy to drink to the bottom, but the guy was against alcohol, especially since he was driving. The headman asked not to solder the guy, to which friends noticed that Shun behaved like a mommy. Throughout the evening, students had fun and rested. all except the culprit of the celebration. Satisfied classmates left the dining room in high spirits, being pretty filed. The young man who was the last in the company of students called out by the teacher Zoe. The girl said that she bought an ointment that effectively removes scars. But the guy replied that she had almost healed early. The teacher insisted that the student go to her office to change the bandage. But Chen referred to urgent affairs. At that moment, a saving taxi just arrived, which would prevent the guy from being alone with Miss Zoe. The student hurried to the car by promising the teacher that he would be careful along the way. The girl did not understand why the guy was scared when she offered him to change the bandage. Sitting into the car, the student asked the taxi driver to take him to the lake to take a walk before going to bed. Finding himself by Lake Butskin, the guy intended to hide from the teacher. Well, here he was not allowed to be alone, as the familiar voice of the police officer suddenly came. A man with a knife in his hand, whom the police tried to stop, rushed right on the Guan. Among the law enforcement officers, Wu Tong was present that she rushed at the suspect armed with a club. With one sharp blow, a woman shot down a criminal, throwing him on a pier near the lake. The officer asked his colleagues to intervene, claiming that she was able to deal with the thief. Chen no longer believed in a coincidence meeting with Wu Tong, believing that the goddess cursed him. After another severe police strike, the criminal finally dropped his weapon. Left without protection, the man rushed right at the student, demanding that he leave the road. The woman told the guy to move away, as she pursued a very dangerous robber. But instead of obeying the officer, Guan set a bandwagon to the criminal. Watching the thief spread on the ground, the young man was dissatisfied with the request of a friend that she asked him to let the man leave. "Get on your feet," the robber said that he remembered the student's face, who was left to live no more than 3 days. The guy, hiding behind the hood, began to portray himself as a victim, which was easy to intimidate. Wooten was very surprised when, getting to the suspect, she found Guan next to him. The police asked, not because of the problems with the girls. The young man was around the lake in the middle of the night. The woman did not believe that Chen just decided to take a walk, adding that she could behave like that because she was almost an older sister. Since the police did not believe in truth, the student invented that he returned home from a computer club. Consider that it will be difficult for a guy to find a taxi at such an hour. Tun offered to take him back to the hostel. Without believing his happiness, the young man considered that the police also could not resist his Mila Lich. Arriving at the hostel, the officer said she was to blame before Chen, when she threatened to plant him, advising in case of problems to contact her. The young man asked the police not to worry, because of which the woman immediately melted. Putting her hand on her chest, Wu Tong did not understand why her heart was ready to jump out of her chest. Being under the door of the room, Guan heard his friends about to pour sulfur acid on his face, envious of his popularity among the girls. He opened the door abruptly. The student scared his neighbors around the room that screamed in one voice. Lin Jingwei asked his comrade not to make noise so much that no one would wake anyone. Across the table, Chen replied that Shun was asleep like a dead and he could not be so easy to wake up. Having began to sharpen the pencil with a clerical knife, the guy reminded his friends about the case of Pan Jian in the restaurant. Immediately surrounded the young man, Bai and Lin began to make excuses that they were just joking. As always, discussing all sorts of nonsense, Guan was ready to forgive his comrades for a misunderstanding by taking a glass of water from them as an apology. Drinking from a mug, the student thought about how laziness was lazy to deal with stupid guys. But at some point, Chen covered a strange feeling, after which light spilled onto him directly from the mug. Finding himself inside the magic cup, the young man wondered where the glass goddess went. Then, in order to call Madame Gu, Guan began to shout her name in the hope that she would respond. For a moment, the guy thought that the goddess had died without waiting for his liberation. Chen began to hastily mourn the death of a girl who will now have to overcome difficulties alone. The suddenly appeared goddess said that it took her more time as she accumulated magical forces. The guy immediately sucked into the portal, but the landing was tough, as the girl suddenly let him go. Guanu that rubbed the cheek that he hit. This world liked much more than the previous one. Standing to his feet, the young man saw a field in front of him, dotted with pencils, not guessing who the goddess wanted to make him from him. Having discovered a stationary knife on the ground, Guan did not believe that it was one of the sacred worlds inside the circle. The student could not get rid of the thought that the test was too situational, and did not even want to think what happened if he was in the toilet at the time of the test. It seemed to the guy that in the sharpening of the pencil it would be extremely difficult to make a mistake. Considering this test easy, after some time, a perfectly sharpened pencil flaunted in the hands of the young man. The voice that arose out of nowhere said that until the next level there were 98 sharpening. That Guan only angered. The student made himself the presence of levels in each subsequent test, but he had no other choice. The guy accidentally broke one pencil, which is why the required amount for the following level increased by a couple of hundred. Such cruel rules were not like Chen, who had previously made a whole bunch of pencils to the gods. However, no one bothered to answer the outrage of the test participant. Already accustomed to such an attitude, Guan returned back to work, without wasting the power. Having spent many hours after sharpening, Chen was surrounded by a mountain of sharpened pencils. And only after 3 months of monotonous work, with shaking hands did the young man finish the passage of the test, imprisoning the last pencil. Having flattened on the ground, the guy believed that he became the best sharpener of pencils in the world. Watching the circle, Guan began to count how many times she activated recently. For 3 weeks, the guy spent 4 times in the inner worlds, which now had to be at least 80 years old. The young man was alarming by the fact that each time the tests became longer. But he decided to trust the goddess. For forgetting with a deep sleep, the student did not see how a bright flame began to spark from the circle. Madame Gu was glad that she would not spend the rest of her days in imprisonment, since Guan managed to free her. Having received freedom, the girl claimed that now he was more likely a homebody who could not go out into the street. Having accumulated enough magical energy, the goddess used it outside the cup. The energy thread penetrated the Guan phone, thanks to which the measurement lord scooped up information. The girl did not limit herself to one gadget, and also entered the young man's laptop. Unable to keep her ordinary clothes, the girl could not resist gatherings on the internet. In the early morning, with the first rays of the student, a sudden telephone woke up. Supply. Chen did not immediately realize that Guan called him, who had not seen him either in the library or in a computer club for a long time. Dressing, the guy wanted to tell his girlfriend about the exchange of students. But the girl was not interested in listening to excuses that she suggested playing. After a couple of minutes, as he agreed with Wen, Guan was waiting for her at the student gate. Then, how was Bai Fan, who was curious where a friend went, since there was no class in the morning? A student set a smile on his face that in a computer club he was waiting for a flower of Wen University. According to Baya, the girl was not only beautiful, but also masterfully played games, and watching her game could always learn something. Since the beauty of the university offered Chen a joint game, this meant that the guy played no worse than her. Guan informed his friends that today they would watch the game of the strongest duo in history. Waiting for the arrival of Wen's guys, seeing the students on the horizon, asked them to hurry. Guan's friends carefully watched the monitors, waiting for the players to begin to show the show. As luck would have it, the search for the game lasted this day longer than usual, and the young man wanted to fill this pause with something. He took out a stationery knife and a new pencil. The guy wanted to demonstrate his unique skill. In a matter of seconds, the student managed to sharpen a pencil until incredible acuteness. Anticipating the delight of the work shown, Guan asked his friends if they wanted to learn this. Wen was frankly boring, and Jingwei said that for a guy who could not really fry eggs, such a skill for him was really good. To the relief of all the gathered, the game began, and Shunjingke asked a comrade not to be distracted from it. As usual, the student took with him to his mug, not even suspecting what it would turn out for him. Madame Ji Yu, who was in the circle, has forced enough strength not only to cover her nudity. The Lord of 3,000 measurements activated her forces to join the game. To her great surprise, Guan lost the current round, not understanding how this could happen. Also, bewitched, Guan asked the guys whether there were no mistakes during the whole game that confirmed their absence. Clicking on the mouse, Chen assured his friends that the victory in the next round would definitely be behind them. The student's character to break through the defense of the new player, deciding that something was wrong with this game. The next defeat made Van get up from the table that she did not understand the reason why they lost. Studying the player's nickname, the girl found that the same person fought 2 games in a row against them. Lin Jingwei, checking the information, found out that the player had a new account, and before that, he had no matches played. Guan suggested playing another time, while he himself was thinking of seeking help, and the goddess. All this time, playing against Guan and Wan Madame Gu found computer games with an interesting occupation. The girl, because of the unstable internet, Chen only by this time I figured out the male could not be distracted by cute videos with animals. Students returned from a computer club completely drooping because of the results of the game. And towards his company stylishly undressed youth, which was just shining in the light. Ven did not leave attempts to get to the bottom of why they lost their advantage in both games. A guy passing by a glamour company suddenly grabbed the girl by the shoulder. Stilaga demanded an apology from a student for the fact that she stepped on his leg. In turn, the university beauty calmly took the claim of the stranger. Clutching his fist, Van agreed that she would have to apologize well to the fashionistas. Quickly, like lightning blows, fists fell upon a stranger who got to the bottom of her. Friends of the beaten guy grabbed him not to kill them and forgive him, giving the opportunity to save his life. Guan sympathized with the guys, because he knew firsthand how hard he had to communicate with Wen, with whom he was engaged in English. Friends of Chen did not know what pressure he was, and therefore decided to continue to treat him more respectfully. The girl did not understand why the students divorced such a hype when Guan saw her in action before, and was not scared by this. The young man believed that Wan was trying to preserve the image of a flower, although he almost parted his life when he received his stomach from her. Bai Fan sharply remembered that he had left something in the hostel, and he would need the help of friends for this, after which he mysteriously winked. Chen wanted to join his friends, but Wan assured him that they were both heading to the library. A friend of the guy did not know that he improved his English, so he decided to specially make mistakes. Turning away from the task, the young man looked at his girlfriend, on which there was no face after the club. The guy gave himself a word that the next time he could definitely cope with the player who ruined the game to both of them. At this time, the student's thoughts were busy that she could not find out anything about her friend's family. Even with the help of her uncle, the girl did not find out anything, and the situation was heated by the approaching graduation. Driving from her self-anxious thoughts, the student turned to her friend. Since Guan looked at Wan, their eyes met, because of which the young man began to feel embarrassed. Although he understood in what situation he ended up, he could no longer tear his gaze. Rising from her seat, the student asked why this guy looked at her like that. The student began to make excuses that it was a simple coincidence. In fact, he was very worried about what happened. Embarrassed, Guan furtively asked her friend why she scared him so much. Ven decided that since the guy worked so hard on his studies, she was thinking of giving him an hour of an advanced quality award. Not believing his happiness, Chen asked the student whether her words were serious, but the girl at the last moment stated that she changed her mind, and that if the young man so wanted to kiss her, he had to pass exams. The relations of students were watched by Zheng He, which was on the top floor in the library. The guy all panted from unrequited love. I don't understand why Van liked such a guy as Chen. Later, the same day, Guan headed for the hospital with his parents who arrived in the city. The student asked his father if his mother had stopped the treatment of her illness for an hour. The man wanted to answer, but his wife interrupted him, claiming that they had accumulated money, and the old friend of his son gave them 180,000. Guan was glad to hear such news, asking his parents to wait for him while he registers to the doctor. While in line, the young man thought that his father lied to his mother, keeping silent about the fact that he was giving money for treatment. Suddenly, the guy rang the phone, with whom he wanted to talk to Jiji Fi. The old friend asked if Chen managed to get to the hospital, who reported that they were only about to register. After talking with friends, Guan raised his head and saw another man he knew. It turned out to be police officers Wu Tong, who was also surprised to meet with a guy in this place. The young man could not help but note that without a form, a woman looked completely different. The police officer asked what Guan forgot in the hospital, who told about his sick mother, also wanted to know what Tun was doing here. The woman replied that she just went to visit a friend, but was already going to patrol. Saying goodbye to the officer, the student considered her behavior suspicious that he was too kind to him. After registration, Chen managed to put his mother in the ward and meet with the attending physician. However, in the conversation, it turned out that the doctor went to the medical college that was in the United States. The man hastened to assure the guy that Dr. Tan would do his mother, that he had recently returned from there. The doctor was awarded for his colleague, who was an experienced doctor, who pulled people out of the world more than once. The conversation with the doctor was interrupted by the girl that, entering the ward, apologized for a sudden visit. The attending physician of his mother Chen was delighted when Dr. Tan herself showed up to them. Having greeted the family, the girl announced that Mrs. Feng Jun would be treated. The student lost his speech at the sight of a new doctor, as he had already met with this girl earlier. Xiao Tan was sorry for the young man who worked in a taxi to pay for the treatment of his mother. The doctor decided that she would try with all his might to dispel the prejudices of Guan about her. Before the girl had time to enter the ward, her patient's son wanted to discuss something alone with her. The remaining one, the doctor bowed to the young man, asking him for forgiveness for what had happened. Having lowered the formalities, Chen asked that another doctor began to treat his mother. The sounding words forced the doctor to return to the past, until the moment of her studies at the College of the United States. The girl's mentor treated her with contempt, insisting that she would understand the office with papers. The former attending physician of his mother Chen forced Xiao Tang to engage in patients who have worsened the condition. The girl drowned her disappointment in alcohol, not understanding why in 2 months of working in the hospital the doctor treated her like an intern. Having sorted it strongly, the girl fell asleep at the lamppost. after which a taxi in which Guan was waiting for her arrived at her. The girl tried to prove her case, claiming that she was aware of the illness of her patient, and it was better than a doctor than she was in the city. In his defense, the guy insisted that he could not allow the treatment of his mother, a man who was getting drunk. The student insisted that Dr. Lu be treated, that he had already encountered such a disease and he had more experience in her treatment. The girl agreed that she could not ask for her profession, and that only her fault was incident. Xiaotang decided to do the guy a favor and give way to Dr. Lu, but she warned that his services would be many times more expensive. The student was grateful to the doctor and asked her not to be offended, and as an apology invited her to dinner. Unfortunately, the doctor refused the proposal of Guan, and tomorrow was probably transferred to Fengjun to treat Dr. Lu. Xiaotan could no longer look at Chen's face, who wanted to kick him with all his might. The next day, Dr. Lu was engaged in the treatment of a student's mother, as he asked. The young man brought fresh tests to the doctor, asking him to check if everything was in order with them. The man, having looked at the results, asked the guy to go out with him to talk alone. The attending physician did not want the patient not yet to know that there was a high probability of an early kidney transplant operation. Such news was dumbfounded by Guan, who thought that his mother was already recovering. The student did not fit in the head why the medicine that showed good results in many patients did not help the mother. Dr. Lu explained that everything depended on human physiology, saying that as soon as if there was a suitable donor, then the transplantation would be carried out immediately. The young man blamed himself that he, his dear son, could not sacrifice his kidney to a sick mother. Guan's thoughts have recently been occupied by his mother, who did not know how to improve her condition. Having rummaged in a backpack, Chen took out a magic cup that he completely forgot about glass. The student urged Mrs. Guise to help his sick mother, that he was sitting at the computer at that time. The girl, although reluctantly, came off from visiting social networks, was not able to ignore her savior. Guan was delighted when a resident of the Mug left her refuge, appearing in front of him. The student began a conversation from afar, but the goddess, asking the guy not to approach her, already knew about his request. Chen hoped that the goddess would be able to help, but the cup level was too low and it was necessary to come at least 50 tests to fill it. The guy surprisingly quickly agreed, asking to start testing right away, regardless of their difficulties. The goddess said that after each test it was necessary to restore the forces of the cup. But there was another more risky way. Without doubting for a second, Guan agreed to anything, even to clean all the social toilets of the world. Among the dimensions was the so-called world of life, reaching the top of which it was necessary to ring the bell to change their fate. Mrs. Gua assured that this effect could be applied to Chen's mother, and how quickly the mother would give the kidney to depend on the efforts of her son. Very soon the student transferred to the world of life, in the middle of which a sacred bell was in space. Guan was very close to a dimension near which was a bell that could change the fate of anyone. It was not clear the young man what exactly he had to do in this world, but no one answered him. Looking around, the guy began to look for the goddess that suddenly disappeared somewhere. The girl was forbidden to enter the world. She could only direct Chen to his entrance, clarifying if he was sure, because she could not just go back. Despite the strict conditions of the world of life, Guan was ready to go to everything to save his mother. The glass goddess was not completely sure whether the young man was brave or just stupid. Madame Jiyu pushed the student in the back, and he instantly flew down, entering a new dimension. The landing of Guan was hard, that before falling, first hit the bell, and only then fed to the ground. Inspecting the bell of fate, the test participant found it somehow strange. The ringing that came from a blow to Chen on a local attraction attracted the attention of the animals that lived nearby. A couple of 10 predatory eyes were aimed at a stranger who arrived at this world. Literally, the next second of the student from the world of life pulled out a huge hand of the goddess. Once again, Madame Jiyu was forced to save the life of the master of the magic cup. The girl turned directly to the bell of fate, introducing herself personally and reading her regalia. The goddess asked the receiver from the god chaos of the supreme this world to provide her with a ray of fate. The young man, who watched what was happening from the side, involuntarily opened his mouth in surprise. The powerful forces gave the glass goddess what she asked, tightly holding the ray in her hand. Looking at the student, Madame Gu proudly stated that she had once again saved him. Returning back to his world, Guan sincerely thanked the goddess, mentioning that he had briefly managed to consider her graceful figure. The girl strongly advised Chen to forget what he saw. Otherwise, the next time she would proper him his eyesight properly. At all pairs, the guy rushed to the hospital to check whether the ray of fate had acted. Father Guan was interested in whether his mother would become better, to which the son replied that God would help them. Suddenly, Xiaotang appeared that she called the student a couple of words, wanting to discuss something with him. The young man suggested that the doctor wanted to talk with him about the kidney transplant. Left alone, the girl, as Chen suggested, spoke of transplantation. The doctor said that a deadly sick patient was found ready to give his organs, and the chances of kidney compatibility were very high. Having woven from such a joyful news, the guy thanked the doctor for the assistance provided. Suddenly, Dr. Tan removed her tears rolled down his cheeks on her cheeks. The doctor said that she had not seen anything like this here, and wanted to believe that she simply returned the debt to Guan. Xiao Tan, returning to work, advised the patient not to talk about the transplant and prepare money, since the procedure was not cheap. After joyful news, the father and son sat in silence for some time, which was suddenly broken. Having pierced his son in the face, the man did not believe in the story told about the salvation of actresses, claiming that Chen was on the content of a rich lady. The student was insulting that his father did not believe in a true story, but could not do anything about it. It didn't matter to his father where Guan got the money because the operation needed 300,000, which he wanted to receive from the sale of his uncle's house. The student was against the sale of the house, so that his parents wandered around rented apartments at that age. The young man, who always relied on his father, now asked him to trust him, claiming that he would find the right amount. Despite the fact that there was already a day in the yard, the actresses of the movie Yage and Yue are still sleeping in their bed. Their sweet dream was interrupted by the vibrated phone that was torn from the calls of Chen Guan. Taking the phone, Jinyue reported that the young man who had saved them was calling, which her friend could not believe in. Having grabbed the phone from her colleague, the actress in love herself wanted to answer the call. The girl with coquetry asked her friend what question he called for them. A little embarrassed, Guan asked when Yage had a free time so he could drive up. Unfortunately, the actress said that he and Jinyue were abroad, as they recorded a song for a new album and returned about a month later. The student had no choice how to agree to meet in a month in order to make up for the girls in the future. Disconnected, the young man exhaled calmly, as he found a way to get money for the treatment of his mother. And yet, Chen had an opinion that it was impossible to rely on someone else's help all the time. Having met with his friends, the guy jumped with joy, claiming that the day was just wonderful. Baifan and Lin Jingwei could not figure out what suddenly happened to their comrade. Grinding cheerfulness, the student hummed one famous pop song. The neighbors in the room felt embarrassed, so they decided to pretend that they did not know Guan. Without looking under his feet, the student did not notice the banana peel in front of him, on which he eventually slipped. The guy did not understand how this could happen, and lost his balance over the railing and fell into the water. Friends immediately began to mock the student, claiming that their friend was the first to fall so stupid in recent years. Guan asked his comrades as soon as possible to pull him out of the water so that his new smartphone did not get wet. However, instead of the expected help, the guy began to shoot passers-by on their phones. Lao Tzu, meanwhile, wondered why he could not get through to the god of driving. Having enough funds, Guan selected a telephone for a newer model, deciding to postpone a short walk, so as not to catch a cold. Remembering the recent fall on the bridge, the young man was already preparing for the next surge of popularity on the network. The student was horrified when he found comments under the video in which his name was mentioned. Chen decided to check who the commentator was, that he gave his identity under the very video. It turned out to be Dun Tao, a swimmer from his university, who chuckled at Guang, which, in his words, did not dare to compete against him. From the post on the network that Tao laid out, Guan found out that his opponent managed to become a swimming champion. The young man could not believe that he gave the student the opportunity to become a champion. While the swimmer decided to discredit his name, then the young man began to walk not only at the university but also in his environs. But he could not find Dun Tao. In order to somehow relieve stress, Guan decided to sit in a computer game upon returning to the hostel. Suddenly, the guy doused a car from a puddle passing near the sidewalk. Wiped himself from dirty water, the student recognized the car that it was just belonging to the man he was looking for. The swimming champion, having left the car, pretended not to notice the former opponent. Dong, apologizing for his carelessness, pulled 100 wen chen, asked him to buy himself normal clothes. Rolling the sleeves, the sprayed young man said that, by a funny coincidence, Tao was looking for. The student, watching the guy preparing for the fight, did not understand whether Guan really did not know who he was. The swimming champion all trembled when Chen began to go to him with an evil grimace. Only the Dun was grabbed by the clothes. He lost his glasses at that moment, as the guy began to scream that he was being killed. The hallways immediately escaped to the student's cries that were clearly on the side of the swimmer in this situation. Zadira, although he was in a less advantageous position, still decided that now was the very moment when he could take revenge on Guanya. Tao repeated that if Chen was scared, he could let him go and return back to his stupid friends. The swimmer, shedding later, continued to play a cool guy, saying that if the young man apologized to him right now, then he will forgive him. Dun was careful to say that he respected Chen, who heard the villain threw about it. The guy flew away from the enemy with force, hit his car that was behind, immediately being near the swimmer. Guan grabbing his head and intended to teach the student respect. The young man struck his head with his head on the windshield of the car, which immediately cracked. Grabbing the Dun Tao, the guy was interested in whether he remembered what he had just taught him. Outraged, the swimmer asked his comrades why they stood as they were dug instead of helping him. Having bestowed his comrades in a tough gaze, Guan warned that they would not even risk approaching him. Pointing a finger at the sky, the young man repeated that the heavens themselves wanted him to teach hooligans good manners. Tao's friends looked at each other meaningfully, that they were not going to contact a crazy guy. Suddenly, the rattle of tires sounded, which made the guys move away from the roadway. A three of expensive cars raced to students at speed, which began to slow down around them. Lao Tzu looked out of one car that he asked the hooligans where Chen Guan could be found. The student with a shaking hand pointed to the young man, that at that moment he was still holding his comrade. The swimmer, without realizing what purpose the racer was looking for Guan, decided that something interesting would begin now. The young man, who did not see people behind him, demanded that they attack all at once, not wanting to spend their time on them anymore. The racer, familiar to him, joyfully announced that he had finally found a divine driver. Throwing Tao to the ground, the guy at the sight of a friend demanded from him 300 yuan for the intersection of a double continuous. The girl of the racer of the Ji Fei, who greeted the student, also looked out of the car. Dun Tao was fenced by what was happening, until the last not understanding what was happening here. The young man asked his students to wait a bit, because he was busy with an individual occupation, pointing at this moment a swimmer. The racer, putting his hand on the shoulder of Guanu, asked not to rush and let him teach Zadir. Almost stuttering, the champion of the Olympics asked the stranger to stop, not taking his eyes off his fists. Suddenly, Lao Tzu said that the swimmer's car crashed into him. The more he shocked the beaten student. Friends of the racer appeared from the cars that, armed with a weapon, they prepared to punish Zadir. Right before the eyes of the Dun, a crowd of strangers with fierce hatred began to destroy his car. Chen became embarrassed for his opponent, who hoped that the student would further wander and began to run away in time in such situations. As soon as Lao Tzu looked at the swimmer, the student all shook with fear, hoping that they would not dare to touch him. The racer did not want to waste time on Tao and threw his business card in his head if he wanted to compensate for something. Jafei followed the example of her boyfriend and also threw a business card into the poor fellow. He picked up the business card. The swimmer was in shock, as the girl turned out to be the very legendary director of the corporation. Roaming on the road, Dong caught himself thinking that he would never dare to go to such people for compensation. The interior of the TZU car was furnished with the latest technology, having everything necessary for the driver. Chen asked his friend if they arrived for driving lessons. Then why couldn't they just call? The racer replied that they tried, but it was unrealistic to get through to the guy, so they decided to drive up. Only now the student recalled his phone, which was safely recessed in the river. The guy wondered where so many people came from, where they came with Lao. To preserve the image of a divine driver, the young man had to hide a shameful fall into the river from the riders. Zhu replied that he was to blame for the teacher, because more than 100 people came, but the racer had to take 20 of them. Soon, the whole gang of drivers was at the gates of Fanxuan, where they first met with Guan. Drivers jumped like small children who were eager to learn the drift from the divine driver. The student had already regretted that he agreed to become a teacher, because he did not know how to properly teach. Having called the main one, the young man decided to start training with him. Building up already on the way, since Chen did not expect so many students, he was forced to drive a mountain track only once, while the rest would watch and remember. No one began to argue with the driving god, so the guy hastened to take the driver's place. Sitting into the car, Guan realized that he had no idea how to start a car of this brand. Watching the teacher, Lao Tzu asked him what was wrong, and the student was forced to admit that he did not know how to get a car. After a couple of simple manipulations, the racer demonstrated how to correct this brand. Literally the next second, the sports car at great speed rushed along a winding highway. From under the wheels of the car, which perfectly went into each turn, sparks of flame fell. The racer, which was at the finish, spotted the result of Guan, which was 34 seconds. Lao Tzu did not understand what had just happened to him, while Chen wanted to know if his student remembered at least something. The guy insisted that at least a little understood the technique, although in fact he could not see anything behind the fast driving. Having managed as quickly as possible, Guan called the next student to himself. Diao, a member of the racing gang, from the side. Everything looked much easier, which did not have time to follow the student's movements. Having drove again with the same route, Chen at the end of the trip made a police turn to the delight of the audience. Now the guy had an idea of what it was like to ride with a divine driver. When asked if the racer managed to remember at least something, he replied that he was unlikely to reach the level of his teacher. For everyone who rode in the same car with a student, life was divided into before and after. When all the students graduated from their first lesson, it was the turn of the Fei, which was the last on the list. The girls said that the teacher would spend all the remaining time with her, which caused indignation from her friends. The guy claimed that his time was expensive, but this never was embarrassed by the racer. Night came in the yard, but the neighbors in the room of Guan still did not sleep, studying something in his laptop. Having opened the door sharply, the student demanded that his comrades explain what they were doing at such a time of day. Chen friends until the last tried to remain calm and advised the comrade not to get excited. Having squeezed out between the students, the guy wanted to know what exactly they looked. It turned out that someone shot up the moment how riders beat the Dongtao car and laid out this video for the forum. Guan said that he did not touch the car and managed to earn a little money, was in high spirits. The young man did not want to focus on this much, so he decided to lie down as a bed as soon as possible. But there was something else that Lin Jingwei wanted to tell, that it was necessary to know Chen. The student was alert, because from his comrades one could expect anything. The guy demonstrated a message from the teacher Zhou that she wrote Guania throughout the day. The guy could not postpone a meeting with the teacher and wanted to deal with it as soon as possible. Having greeted the teacher first of all, the young man asked why she still waited for him despite his later time. Without any explanation, the girl told her student to proceed after her. The student, along with the teacher, went in complete silence, which only alarmed Chen. Suddenly Zhou turned to the young man shouting his name, which only scared him. Guan decided that the teacher, for some reason unknown to him, wanted to hit him. So it happened because the cloud in the hands of Chen. The teacher asked not to force others to worry about him. To reassure Zhou, the guy replied that Jen could not harm him, as the video was shot outside the school and he did not touch the car. The student's statement made the girl calm down, which only the moment was interested in the Dun Tao. The student claimed that the swimmer would not dare to quarrel with him, because the acquaintances of Chen were serious people. Having solved all the issues, the girl ordered the guy to return to her hostel while she herself went home. As soon as the girl took a step, she felt wild pain that she pierced her body. The teacher did not look under her feet and stumbled on the stone, hitting on him very much. Unable to maintain the balance of Zhou right there, flew right into the arms of her student. The guy did not expect such a turn of events. He also fell with the girl that all reddened because of his clumsiness. The student's face also turned on with a paint, for which such a rapprochement with the teacher made him embarrassed. Rising, the teacher in a trembling voice reported that she had seen the snake. On the side where Miss Zhou pointed out red eyes, which hid in the thickets of shrubs, the guy asked the teacher not to worry, for whom the snake was not something terrible. Guan was sure that such a small snake would never attack a person. But immediately after these words, the reptile attacked the student, opening his mouth. I understand that he had no other way out. Chen decided to block the snake's attack with his hand. The sharp, bad predator drank in the finger of Guan, forcing the student to swear dirtily. The teacher asked the student to remain calm, although it seemed that she reassured not his, but herself. After the trick he made, Chen managed to grab the snake, demonstrating all this Zhou. The guy, who was completely absorbed in the caught predator, ignored the bloodied finger, which terrified his teacher. Until the last moment, the teacher tried to overcome his indecision. While the student was still busy with a snake, the girl suddenly attacked him. Miss Zhou's student froze for a moment, feeling something strange when the girl touched him. Turning around, Guan was very embarrassed by the actions of the teacher, ready to fall through the ground. Clutching the student's hand, the teacher tried to suck out a poison of wounded fingers. The young man took his hand away from the teacher, claiming that he was bitten by a rat snake, that he was not poisonous. Burning with shame, the girl was waiting for the explanation why the guy did not report it before, who was justified, that he did not immediately notice her presence. Zhou could no longer be with the student after what happened, so she rushed home. The next day, the director of the University of Vanzhen, along with other teachers, appeared in the Guan group. Entering the audience, the man demanded that the student of Chen Guan immediately approach him. The announced student asked that the director was required of him. Zhen claimed that the young man had terrible behavior, who fought and intimidated other students. However, the guy calmly took the accusations against him, interested in what he had not yet pleased the director. The headman Xiaoxun stated to defend the classmate, stating that Chen was not at all like that, and the director Van was apparently mistaken. Ren Yuan intervened in the conversation, saying that if you leave such students unpunished, the university will cease to be respected by the public. When it came to the fact that Guan sent Pan Zhang to the hospital, the girl said that everyone knew about the student's vile intentions. The guy insisted that the headman liked Guan, so she fenced him. And the relationship between the guys was terrible before. Lin Jingwei asked the classmate to follow his tongue. Recalling what exactly Jiang was beaten for, Chen asked his friend to be more restrained, because at that moment many teachers looked at them. Looking at the director, Guan decided to go with him to personally figure it out. Ren Yuan only grunted, confident that this time Guanu is so easy not to get rid of. Van Zhen was only glad to see a student to deal with a student who would be immediately excluded as soon as he made a mistake in the eyes of everyone. His friends who also wanted to go with him stood to defend the classmate, because this case concerned the entire group. Robko, Xiaoxun, also expressed her desire to go to the director along with the others. Vice President Khan asked the guy not to worry, assuring that the university would make the right decision and would not punish good students.